Imagine the sun setting over the golden sands of Egypt, the last rays of light casting long shadows across temples, markets, and quiet mud-brick homes. The heat of the day finally gives way to cooler breezes, and life begins to slow down. But what did the people of ancient Egypt do as the stars appeared above the Nile? How did they prepare for rest after days filled with farming, trade, worship, and family life? Tonight, we'll slip gently into their world and uncover the evening routines that guided them into the stillness of night. Welcome to History for Sleep, where we bring you long, gentle journeys into the past. This channel is created especially for those who find it difficult to drift off, or who simply love to unwind with calming stories of history. If you enjoy these explorations, I invite you to subscribe, so you'll always have a peaceful story waiting for you at the end of the day. And while you're here, I'd love to know what moments in history do you most want to fall asleep to? Or when do you usually listen in the quiet of night, in the middle of a restless afternoon, or as you settle in after work? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read them all, and your ideas help shape the journeys we take together. In this episode, we'll wander through the twilight hours of ancient Egypt, exploring how workers, priests, farmers, scribes, and even pharaohs transitioned from the busy day into restful night. We'll talk about the foods they ate, the rituals they practiced, the stories they told, and the small, comforting habits that prepared them for sleep beneath the desert sky. So close your eyes if you'd like, let your body relax, and let the stories carry you slowly back in time. Tonight, the Nile glitters in the moonlight, the air is alive with distant songs, and the lamps flicker in quiet homes. Together, we'll walk alongside the ancient Egyptians as they prepare for rest. The day in ancient Egypt began with brightness, heat, and the endless hum of life. From the rising sun over the desert horizon to the long hours of toil in fields, workshops, and markets, the people lived by the rhythm of the sun's journey. Yet as the day waned, something magical unfolded. When the sky began to glow in hues of orange, red, and gold, the entire land seemed to pause. Sunset was not merely a change in lighting, it was a profound moment of transition, carrying with it deep symbolic and spiritual meaning. The ancient Egyptians saw the sun not as an impersonal ball of fire in the sky, but as the god Ra himself, traveling across the heavens in his solar bark. Each evening, as the sun dipped toward the western horizon, Egyptians believed Ra was entering the realm of night, sailing through the underworld to battle chaos and ensure his rebirth at dawn. Thus, the setting sun represented both closure and continuity, an ending, but also the promise of renewal. For the people, this cycle mirrored their own lives. Work ending with dusk, rest during the night, and new beginnings when light returned. As the fiery disk sank, life along the Nile shifted. Farmers working the fertile floodplains gathered their tools and made their way home, sometimes with baskets of vegetables or bundles of reeds balanced on their shoulders. Fishermen who had spent hours in small papyrus boats pulled to shore, their nets heavy with the day's catch. Artisans in bustling workshops lowered their hammers and chisels, setting aside unfinished projects until the next day. Merchants in open-air markets closed their stalls, counting their profits as the air cooled around them. The sky itself offered a nightly spectacle. The desert, with its vast openness, allowed for sunsets of extraordinary brilliance. Colors bled into one another, brilliant scarlets melting into deep purples, with streaks of fiery gold reflecting on the slow-moving waters of the Nile. For Egyptians, this was more than a beautiful sight. It was a reassurance that the cosmic order, Mat, was holding steady. The harmony of the natural world, expressed in the daily journey of the sun, was seen as a reflection of divine balance. In villages and cities, families often paused at sunset to acknowledge this shift. Some offered small prayers, thanking Ra for his light and asking for safe passage through the night. Others turned toward the west, the land of the setting sun, and the resting place of the dead, reflecting quietly on the ancestors who had gone before them. Temples grew busier at this hour, as priests prepared evening offerings, lighting lamps and incense to honor the gods who would guard the night. The sensory experience of sunset in Egypt was unforgettable. Imagine the coolness of the desert breeze replacing the harsh dryness of the afternoon, carrying with it a faint scent of river water, lotus blossoms, and cooking fires beginning to smoke in the villages. The air grew gentler, softer, like the world itself was winding down. The sounds shifted too, the calls of herons and ibises by the water, the lowing of cattle being herded into pens, and the laughter of children racing home before the dark set in. For those who lived along the Nile, the river mirrored the sky. As light faded, the calm water transformed into a glowing ribbon of bronze and silver, slowly darkening to black. Farmers often rinsed their faces and hands in its cool depths before returning to their homes. For travelers arriving by boat, the sight of lanterns glowing faintly along the riverbanks signaled welcome and rest. Sunset was also a moment for reflection. Just as Ra's journey into the underworld was thought to be perilous, yet necessary, so too did the people see night as a time of vulnerability. Darkness brought uncertainty, wild animals stirred, and the unseen world of spirits and gods seemed closer. Yet it also brought renewal. Families trusted in protective gods like Bes and Taweret to guard them. They trusted in Ra to return at dawn. In this balance between fear and faith, evening became both humbling and reassuring. Across Egypt, from grand temples at Thebes to small hamlets along the Nile Delta, this moment united all people in a shared awareness of the cycle of life. No matter one's status, farmer, scribe, servant, or noble, the setting sun was a reminder of connection to the land, to the gods, and to the eternal rhythm of day and night. As darkness deepened, torches and oil lamps flickered to life. Yet for a little while longer, people lingered outside to watch the last streaks of color fade into the quiet indigo of evening. Children might be hushed by their parents, told to respect the coming of night. Adults might murmur prayers, whisper stories, or sit in silence, allowing themselves to be soothed by the gradual dimming of the world. The transition from daylight to night was not abrupt, but gradual, and the Egyptians embraced this liminal space. Just as twilight softened the line between work and rest, it also softened the boundary between the earthly world and the divine. To watch the sun set was to glimpse, however briefly, the mysteries of existence, the certainty of endings, and the beauty of beginnings waiting just beyond the horizon. For those drifting into sleep centuries later like us, lying in bed and listening to these words, the same rhythm still offers comfort. The cycle of the sun reminds us that no matter how tiring the day has been, night brings pause, and dawn will always return. In the hush of sunset over the Nile, the ancient Egyptians found peace. And so too can we, as we let our bodies relax, trusting that the stars will watch over us through the quiet hours ahead. As the glow of sunset softened across the Egyptian sky, another shift took place, the return of people to their homes. For most Egyptians, the day had been spent under the weight of labor, whether tilling the soil, harvesting crops, tending animals, or carrying out tasks in bustling towns. Evening was the moment when tools were set aside, bodies were stretched after long hours of work, and weary but satisfied people made their way back to the comfort of family, food, and rest. The Nile Valley was fertile, but farming there was no small task. Fields were prepared and watered by the rhythms of the river's flood, and crops like barley, wheat, flax, and vegetables demanded constant care. Farmers bent beneath the sun, guiding oxen through plowed furrows, or carrying buckets of water by hand when the land grew dry. Shepherds guided flocks of sheep and goats along the grassy banks, while fishermen spent long hours with nets and harpoons, waiting for the steady tug of fish beneath the surface. Artisans, too, worked with hands and tools all day, shaping wood, carving stone, or painting ceramics in workshops that grew warm and noisy under the midday sun. When dusk came, there was relief in the air. The coolness of the evening was like a gift after hours of heat. Farmers, their shoulders aching and their feet dusty, lifted the last bundles of grain or vegetables and carried them home. Some brought papyrus stalks for weaving, or gourds and dates to store for later meals. Shepherds led animals back into simple enclosures made of reed and mudbrick, where the creatures could rest safely through the night. Fishermen, satisfied with their day's catch, hauled baskets of glistening tilapia, catfish, and perch up the riverbank. Villages at dusk grew lively with this return. Narrow pathways between mud-brick houses filled with movement, laughter, and chatter. Families who had been scattered through the fields or riverbanks now reunited. Parents greeted children who had spent the day playing in courtyards or helping with small tasks. The sound of conversations, of water splashing as buckets were poured into jars, and of animals bleating or lowing filled the twilight air. This reunion was as much emotional as physical, the reassurance of safety, the joy of being together again. Washing was often the first task upon returning. After a day's work, Egyptians valued cleanliness. Farmers rinsed their faces and hands in cool water drawn from jars. Dust and sweat were gently wiped away, sometimes with a splash of scented oil rubbed onto the skin to soften it. Even the poorest households tried to keep water handy for this small ritual of refreshment. Cleanliness was not just about comfort, but also about spiritual balance, a way of maintaining harmony between body and soul. Clothing, too, might be changed in the evening. Loose linen garments, crinkled and damp from the day, were sometimes swapped for fresher robes. A simple kilt or shift made from light, woven fabric felt softer and cooler against the skin at night. Wealthier Egyptians had multiple garments, but even modest households tried to keep at least one set of clothing reserved for relaxation and evening use. The scent of perfumed oils, lotus, frankincense, or myrrh sometimes filled the air, giving an atmosphere of calm luxury even in humble dwellings. Inside the home, activity picked up as food was prepared. Women often ground grain into flour, using heavy stone querns, while children might help fetch water or gather fuel for the hearth. Farmers who had brought in fresh produce contributed vegetables or herbs, while fishermen laid out their catch to be cooked. The home was not just a place of rest, but also the center of nourishment, warmth, and gathering. Evening was also a time to share stories. As families gathered in courtyards or inside simple rooms, men spoke of the fields and their progress, while women exchanged news of neighbors or kin. Children were often full of questions, eager to tell what they had seen during the day's strange insects, funny games, or the sight of a passing caravan. These small stories, told with laughter and affection, knitted the family closer together. In larger households, servants and laborers also returned, joining in the rhythm of dusk. A noble household might see scribes putting away papyrus scrolls, overseers reporting the day's numbers, or artisans delivering goods crafted for their masters. But even in wealthier circles, the essence of evening was the same, the relief of labor ending and the pleasure of returning to the hearth. The sounds of dusk in these villages were both lively and soothing. The soft clatter of clay pots, the murmur of voices, the distant rhythm of a drum or flute from a neighbor's home, all these blended into a kind of evening music. Unlike the daytime hours filled with hard labor and heat, dusk carried a more relaxed, unhurried pace. People slowed down, their steps lighter, their words less urgent. The very air felt different. The hot, stifling midday heat dissolved into cool breezes drifting off the Nile. The smell of earth, river water, roasting fish, and fresh bread mingled in the air. Shadows lengthened across the mud-brick walls, and the first stars appeared, flickering faintly against the fading glow of the western horizon. For the Egyptians, this return home was not only physical, but also spiritual. The western horizon, where the sun sank, was symbolically tied to the afterlife, the land of the dead. Each evening was a small echo of that greater journey, a reminder of the cycles of life and death, work and rest. To return home at dusk was to mirror the sun god Ra, returning to the underworld, a journey into darkness that promised renewal when light returned. Some families marked this transition with prayers. Offerings of bread or beer might be placed at small household shrines, calling on protective gods to watch over them. Bes, the squat, bearded household deity, was often invoked to drive away evil spirits and ensure a safe night. Taweret, the goddess in the form of a pregnant hippopotamus, was especially beloved by mothers, called upon to protect children as they slept. These small acts of devotion gave reassurance, reminding families that even as the world grew darker, they were not alone. And so, as Egyptians returned home each evening, they found not only physical rest, but also emotional and spiritual renewal. The end of the day brought closure, but also the warmth of belonging. In every mud-brick village, every riverside town, dusk wrapped its arms gently around the people, guiding them from labor into peace. For us, too, there is something timeless in this rhythm. The relief of finishing a day's work, the comfort of coming home, the joy of seeing loved ones again, these are experiences that link us across millennia. As we picture farmers setting down tools, fishermen carrying their catch, and families gathering in the glow of firelight, we can feel that same deep exhale, that sense of release as night draws near. And just as they once did, we too can let the day fall away, knowing that evening offers the promise of rest. When Egyptians returned home at the close of day, one of the most anticipated moments was the evening meal. The sun had slipped below the horizon, families had reunited, and the warm glow of lamps or hearth fires lit the small courtyards and rooms of mud-brick houses. Now came a time not of labor, but of nourishment, when food and drink brought comfort, energy, and a sense of belonging. The diet of ancient Egyptians was shaped by the Nile, that mighty river which watered their fields and sustained their lives. At the heart of almost every meal, morning or night, were bread and beer. Bread, made from emmer wheat or barley, was baked daily, often coarse and heavy with bits of husk and grain. It was filling and dependable, the foundation of the Egyptian table. Beer, thick and cloudy, brewed from fermented barley, was both a drink and a kind of liquid food, rich in calories and nutrients. In the evening, after long hours of work, both bread and beer were eagerly welcomed, symbols of sustenance and life itself. But there was much more. Vegetables filled the diets of ordinary Egyptians, gathered from fields and gardens. Onions, garlic, and leeks were especially common, their sharp flavors cutting through the heaviness of bread and adding vitality to meals. Cucumbers, lettuces, and radishes appeared on simple wooden platters, offering refreshing coolness after the heat of the day. Lentils, chickpeas, and beans provided hearty stews, simmered over small fires, seasoned with herbs coriander, dill, and fenugreek. Dates and figs, sweet and nourishing, were a favored evening treat. Children especially delighted in these, their sticky fingers evidence of the joy such fruits brought. Honey, a precious sweetener, was rarer but treasured when available, drizzled lightly on bread or mixed into porridge. For protein, fish from the Nile tilapia, catfish, and perch were staples. Some were roasted over open flames, others dried or salted for longer storage. Meat was less common for ordinary families, often reserved for festivals or special occasions. Yet poultry, ducks, geese, or pigeons might appear on the tables of those who could afford it. Imagine the sights and smells of these meals. A clay oven glowing with embers, the scent of baking bread wafting into the air, the hiss of fish cooking on a flat stone or in a small pan, its skin crisping, its flesh turning tender and white. A pot of lentils bubbling gently, steam rising into the cool evening air. A platter of cucumbers and onions, cut fresh and sprinkled with herbs, their fragrance sharp and green. The sweetness of dates shared around the circle, sticky and satisfying. These were the flavors of home, the tastes of comfort after long hours of toil. Meals were not only practical, but social. Families gathered together, sitting on mats or low stools, food shared from common dishes. Bread was often used as a tool, torn into pieces to scoop up stews or sauces. Conversation flowed, parents recounting their day, children chattering excitedly about games or lessons, elders offering wisdom or telling stories of ancestors. Eating was never only about feeding the body. It was about feeding the bonds between people. Beer played a special role in this ritual. Thick and hearty, it was drunk from tall jars or smaller clay cups, often flavored lightly with dates. For workers, it was restorative, replenishing the energy lost in the fields. For families, it was celebratory, a sign of the abundance granted by the Nile's generosity. And for the Egyptians, beer was more than just sustenance. It was sacred. They believed it was a gift from the gods, especially Hathor, goddess of joy, music, and love, who was often called the mistress of drunkenness. To drink beer in the evening was to take part in a divine blessing, to feel joy ripple gently through the body. The hearth itself held symbolic importance. Fire brought warmth, protection, and transformation. By cooking food, the household shaped raw gifts of the earth into nourishment, and this act was seen as part of the cosmic order, Mat. A well-fed family was a harmonious family, and harmony echoed the divine balance of the universe. Thus, even the simple act of sharing bread and fish at night carried deeper meaning. It affirmed life, continuity, and order. In wealthier households, the evening meal could be lavish. Tables laden with roasted goose, joints of beef, spiced stews, fruits from distant lands, and cups of imported wine marked the difference between rich and poor. Musicians might play harps or flutes in the background, dancers moving softly as guests reclined on couches, eating with leisure and ease. But whether a peasant family gathered around a single clay pot or nobles feasted in decorated halls, the essence of the evening meal remained the same. Food binding people together, comfort flowing in the quiet hours before rest. For children, evening meals carried joy beyond nourishment. They learned family traditions, how to break bread properly, when to offer thanks, and the meanings of the foods before them. Parents sometimes used mealtime as a chance to pass down lessons, weaving history, myth, and moral tales into the rhythms of chewing and sipping. For the young, food was paired with memory, and so the flavors of bread, onions, and dates became tied forever to the warmth of family and the safety of home. Even rituals of gratitude surrounded the meal. Some families placed small pieces of bread or drops of beer at household shrines before eating, an offering to deities who protected their homes. Others whispered prayers of thanks to the Nile, whose waters made all food possible. These small gestures reminded them that meals were not guaranteed, but gifts, and that humility before the gods was essential. As the meal ended, there was contentment. Bellies full, voices softened, laughter settled into smiles. Embers in the hearth glowed faintly, their warmth lingering in the air. Lamps flickered gently, shadows dancing across walls. Some families lingered, talking quietly, while others prepared to settle children into bed. The rhythm of night had begun, and with it, the peace that came after nourishment. For the Egyptians, the evening meal was more than food. It was a ritual of renewal. Just as Ra-Ra journeyed into the underworld each night to be reborn, so too did the people see their nightly meals as a way of restoring energy, life, and balance. To eat was to prepare for the mysteries of sleep, to strengthen the body and soothe the spirit for the hours of darkness ahead. And for us, imagining these meals across thousands of years, there is comfort too. The act of gathering with loved ones, of breaking bread and sharing conversation, is timeless. Whether in a mud brick home lit by oil lamps or in our own modern kitchens, the evening meal remains one of humanity's deepest rituals of connection. As the Egyptians once leaned back after their meals, content and ready for night, so can we, letting the body relax, trusting that we have been nourished, cared for, and made whole again. As the evening meal settled and the warmth of the hearth dimmed into glowing embers, ancient Egyptian households often shifted into a time of gentle leisure. The hardest labors of the day were behind them. Fields were quiet, animals secured, tools stored away. What remained was the soft, slower rhythm of night, a time for music, for storytelling, and for quiet moments of relaxation before sleep. Music was at the heart of Egyptian culture. It was not reserved only for temples or great festivals. It lived within homes, echoing softly in courtyards, gardens, and village lanes. Instruments were simple but enchanting. Harps, large and small, were strummed with delicate fingers, their strings humming like threads of golden light. Flutes, made from reeds cut along the Nile's banks, carried sweet, breathy notes that floated gently into the cooling air. Sistrums, small rattles with metal discs, added a soft, rhythmic shimmer. Drums, beaten with hands or sticks, kept a low pulse beneath it all, like the steady heartbeat of the evening. Imagine a family gathered together after their meal. Perhaps the father or older son lifts a small lute, plucking notes as children lean against their mother's side. The grandmother hums an old melody, and soon voices join together in song. Music was not polished performance, but a shared offering, soothing tired muscles and calming restless minds. Some songs were cheerful and lively, drawing laughter and clapping hands. Others were slow and melodic, filled with longing or praise for the gods. The rhythms could be hypnotic, easing listeners into a state where the worries of the day seemed far away. Stories, too, filled Egyptian nights. Long before the art of writing spread widely, tales were passed from mouth to mouth, generation to generation. By evening light, parents told children myths of gods and goddesses, of Ra's daily journey across the sky, of Isis's devotion in searching for Osiris, of Horus's battles to restore order. These stories were more than entertainment. They were lessons in morality, explanations of natural mysteries, and reminders of the divine order, Mayat, that guided Egyptian life. But not all stories were about gods. Many were folktales adventures of clever peasants outwitting nobles, or trickster animals teaching lessons through mischief. There were ghost stories, too, whispered by firelight, where spirits wandered from tombs or gods tested mortals in disguise. Children often gasped and clutched each other's hands, while adults chuckled knowingly, enjoying the thrill of harmless fright before the safety of sleep. Relaxation took many forms. Some families played simple games throwing knucklebones, a pastime similar to dice, or moving small pieces across boards in games like Senet, the game of passing, which symbolized the soul's journey through the afterlife. Others found peace in conversation, discussing the events of the day, planning for tomorrow's work, or sharing news from neighbors and markets. For women, weaving or spinning might continue by lamplight, the rhythmic movement of hands both productive and calming. Men sometimes carved small trinkets, mended tools, or repaired nets, their work slowed to a pace that felt almost meditative. In wealthier homes, relaxation could be more elaborate. Professional musicians or dancers might be invited to perform for guests reclining on cushioned couches. Servants poured wine, more luxurious than the common beer, while perfumes and incense filled the air. Noblemen and women might debate philosophy, poetry, or the stars, their conversations drifting into the night. Yet even in these elegant gatherings, the essence remained the same. Music, stories, and companionship softened the edges of the day. One of the most soothing aspects of the evening was scent. Perfumes and oils were a hallmark of Egyptian life, not merely luxuries, but part of daily comfort. After bathing or washing at dusk, Many Egyptians anointed themselves with fragrant oils of lotus, myrrh, or cedar wood. The air of a household in the evening might carry the mingled aromas of bread cooling, incense burning, and sweet oils warming on the skin. These scents, combined with music and laughter, created an atmosphere of deep calm. Children, especially, thrived in this time. After their small chores were finished, they sat close to parents and grandparents, absorbing songs and stories like sponges. These evenings shaped their understanding of the world. They learned the cycles of the gods, the importance of kindness and cleverness, and the comfort of family unity. Lullabies often drifted into the mix, soft melodies designed to soothe them toward sleep, accompanied by gentle rocking or the rhythmic tapping of hands. Protective amulets, shaped like scarabs or small figures of Bes, were sometimes tucked near their sleeping places, reassuring both children and parents that the night held no danger. Relaxation also had a spiritual side. To rest was not considered laziness, but part of the natural order. The gods themselves rested, the earth rested, the sun god Ra rested in the underworld each night before rising again. By allowing themselves leisure, Egyptians aligned with the cosmic cycle. Even laughter, song, and storytelling were viewed as extensions of joy given by the gods. Hathor, goddess of music and pleasure, was believed to smile upon those who filled their evenings with beauty and love. The landscape itself contributed to relaxation. As night deepened, the sounds of the desert grew more pronounced, the whisper of wind across sand, the distant cry of jackals, the croak of frogs near irrigation canals. These sounds became a kind of background music, natural and eternal. For Egyptians, they were reminders that the world was alive and watchful, that even in darkness there was order and presence. We might imagine now a small family seated in their courtyard. A harp rests against the wall, its strings still quivering from a final chord. A mother hums a lullaby, her child already drifting towards sleep in her lap. A father leans back, sipping the last of his beer, eyes half closed as he listens to the chorus of crickets and frogs beyond the walls. The stars glitter above, the constellations familiar and reassuring, guides for both travelers and dreamers. In this picture, we see both the ordinary and the timeless, the universal human desire for peace at the end of the day. For us today, the thought of such evenings is a reminder. Even in a world without electricity, screens, or endless demands, people sought ways to relax, to enjoy beauty, to connect through sound and story. Their evenings were simple, yet deeply human music, laughter, tales, and togetherness, preparing body and spirit for sleep. And so, as the ancient Egyptians allowed their hearts to settle and their minds to wander into dreams, so may we. By filling our own evenings with gentle sound, calming stories, and soft companionship, we follow the same path. We, too, can let the day fall away and embrace the healing quiet of night. After the songs had faded and the last echoes of laughter softened into the night, many Egyptians turned to something deeply important in their evening routines: purification. To them, cleanliness was more than comfort. It was a sacred act, a bridge between the physical world and the divine. Washing, anointing, and preparing the body for sleep were not only practical steps, but spiritual rituals, ensuring that one entered the night under the watchful eyes of the gods. The Egyptian climate made daily washing essential. Dust from the desert winds, sweat from labor, and soot from cooking fires clung to skin and hair throughout the day. To go to bed without cleansing would have felt incomplete, as though one carried the burden of the day into the world of dreams. And so, in the cool of the evening, families washed. For ordinary households, water was drawn from jars kept cool in shaded courtyards. Women and children often filled these vessels earlier in the day, carrying water from the river or canals. At night, a small basin might be set on the ground. With cupped hands, people splashed their faces, necks, arms, and feet, rubbing away dust and fatigue. The simple act of cool water on warm skin was soothing, washing away both dirt and weariness. Those who lived near the Nile sometimes went further. Stepping into the shallow edges of the river at dusk, they rinsed their bodies, the water shimmering in the fading light. For Egyptians, the Nile was not only a source of life, but a sacred being connected to the gods. To immerse oneself in its waters was to partake in renewal, to let the river itself carry away the troubles of the day. Soap, as we know it today, did not exist. Instead, Egyptians used a mixture of natron, a naturally occurring salt, and oils to clean the skin. Natron, found in dry lake beds, had both cleansing and preservative qualities. Blended with water, it worked as a scrub, leaving the body refreshed. Wealthier Egyptians added scented oils or herbs, creating fragrant pastes that left the skin smooth and perfumed. Anointing the body with oils was perhaps the most cherished part of evening purification. After washing, men and women rubbed fragrant oils into their skin, both to moisturize against the harsh climate and to surround themselves with soothing scents. Common people used castor oil or animal fats mixed with herbs, while wealthier families enjoyed more luxurious blends, lotus oil, frankincense, myrrh, or cedarwood. The aroma of these oils filled homes with calming sweetness, lingering as people prepared for sleep. Perfume cones, made of scented wax, were another part of the ritual in certain households. These cones were placed on the head and slowly melted, releasing fragrance through the night. Though more common in feasts and special occasions, they also represented the Egyptian love of surrounding themselves with pleasant aromas, symbols of both beauty and holiness. Hair, too, was tended before sleep. Children often wore their hair short, sometimes shaved with a single sidelock left as a symbol of youth. Adults washed and combed their hair with care, sometimes braiding it or applying oils to keep it smooth. Wigs, worn by both men and women during the day for style and comfort, were removed, cleaned, and carefully stored. The head was often shaved or kept close-cropped for hygiene, and the application of cooling oils or ointments was a final soothing touch. Clothing marked another stage of purification. After removing garments worn during the day often crumpled with sweat and dust, Egyptians changed into fresh linen. Linen was the fabric of Egypt, made from flax grown along the Nile. Its light, airy weave was ideal for the hot climate. To slip into a clean linen kilt or dress at night was like entering a state of renewal. For priests and those serving in temples, purification was even more elaborate. Before entering sacred spaces, priests shaved their entire bodies to remove impurities. They bathed several times a day in sacred pools, using natron and incense-infused water. At night, when tending lamps or preparing for rituals, their bodies had already been purified as a mark of devotion. The same sense of sacred duty echoed in households, though in simpler form. To cleanse the body was to respect the gods and oneself. Children were often included in these evening rituals. Mothers washed their faces and feet, rubbed small drops of oil into their skin, and dressed them in clean garments before bed. Protective amulets were sometimes tied around their necks or wrists, figures of Bes, the dwarf god who frightened away evil, or Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess who guarded mothers and children. These acts reassured both child and parent that the night would be safe, that sleep would be free of harm. Purification was not only physical but spiritual. Egyptians believed the soul traveled during sleep, and that dreams were gateways between the mortal world and the divine. To approach this journey unclean would be disrespectful, even dangerous. By washing, anointing, and dressing in clean linen, one entered the night prepared to walk safely in dreams, under the guidance of protective gods. In wealthier homes, purification could be almost luxurious. Servants poured warm water into basins, fanned their masters with palm leaves, and applied perfumes with gentle hands. Soft linens, embroidered and finely woven, awaited in sleeping chambers. Incense burned in small holders, filling rooms with the scent of frankincense or sandalwood. These layers of care turned the transition to night into a ritual of beauty as much as devotion. Yet in even the humblest huts, with only a jar of cool water and a scrap of linen, the same principle held true. Purification was not measured in wealth, but in intention. The act of washing away the dust of the day, slipping into clean garments, and offering a prayer of thanks was enough to bring peace. It was this balance between the sacred and the ordinary that made evening purification such a powerful part of Egyptian life. Imagine now the feeling of cool water against tired skin, the scent of oils lingering in the air, the softness of clean linen against the body. Lamps flicker, casting warm circles of light on mud brick walls. A sense of calm settles, as though the very act of purification has created a protective shield around the home. The troubles of the day are gone, carried away by water and fire, replaced by stillness and readiness for dreams. For the ancient Egyptians, this nightly ritual was both practical and spiritual. It was preparation for rest, yes, but also preparation for the soul's nightly journey. And in this, they remind us of something timeless, that cleansing the body can also cleanse the mind, and that small rituals of care can bring great peace. As they once lay down to sleep, their bodies perfumed and purified, so may we too find comfort in letting go of the day, washing away worry, wrapping ourselves in comfort, and allowing the night to embrace us, just as it did them thousands of years ago. As the last chores of the evening were completed, and the air cooled into night, many Egyptians turned to their household gods. These protective spirits and deities were constant companions, woven into the fabric of daily life. By day, they watched over work and family. By night, they stood guard against unseen dangers, spirits, illness, or misfortune that might creep in with darkness. Evening, therefore, was a sacred moment of connection, when families sought the comfort of their gods before sleep. Unlike the great gods of temples, Amun, or Osiris household gods, were intimate, approachable, and personal. They belonged to the home, the hearth, the children, and the parents. Their statues or images could be found not in towering sanctuaries, but in modest shrines tucked into courtyards or on shelves in humble mud brick houses. Their presence was a reminder that the divine did not dwell only in temples, but also within the everyday rhythm of family life. One of the most beloved was Bes, the dwarf god of joy, protection, and good fortune. With his squat body, shaggy beard, and fierce grimace, Bes was both comical and frightening. He often stuck out his tongue, wielding knives or rattles to chase away evil spirits. At night, families believed Bes patrolled the household, keeping nightmares at bay and shielding mothers and children from harm. Figurines of Bes, carved in wood or molded in clay, stood guard by bedsides. His image was painted on walls, amulets, and cosmetic jars, ensuring his constant presence. Children especially loved him. He was both protector and entertainer, bringing laughter as well as safety. Another guardian was Taweret, the goddess with the body of a pregnant hippopotamus, the limbs of a lion, and the tail of a crocodile. Though fearsome in appearance, Taweret was a tender protector, especially for women and infants. Mothers prayed to her each evening, asking her to shield their children as they drifted into dreams. Amulets in her shape were worn around the neck, placed under pillows, or hung on household shrines. Her presence reassured families that the vulnerable hours of night would pass in safety. There were others, too. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the dead, was sometimes called upon to protect households from restless spirits. Hathor, goddess of love and joy, was invoked to fill the home with peace and laughter even as darkness grew. Isis, revered as the Great Mother, was a symbol of loyalty and care. Her blessings sought to keep families united through the night. Each household chose which gods to honor most closely, reflecting their needs, hopes, and personal beliefs. Evening rituals were often simple but heartfelt. A small offering of bread, beer, or fruit might be placed at the shrine, accompanied by a whispered prayer. A pinch of incense could be burned, its fragrant smoke rising like a bridge between human and divine. Lamps were sometimes left burning near shrines, both to illuminate the figures and to act as a protective flame against the unseen dangers of night. The shrines themselves varied in scale. In wealthier homes, a small niche might be carved into the wall, decorated with painted images of Bes, Taweret, or other deities. Clay or stone figurines were arranged carefully, with jars of oil or incense nearby. In simpler homes, shrines might be nothing more than a shelf with a carved amulet or a painted wooden plaque. Yet regardless of wealth, the purpose was the same: to make the divine feel present, close, and watchful. Children often participated in these rituals. Parents encouraged them to place small offerings, perhaps a crumb of bread or a flower, before the shrine. They were taught to speak softly to the gods, to thank them for the day, and to ask for safe dreams. These moments were both spiritual and educational, teaching children that the household gods were companions in life, always ready to listen and protect. Night was a vulnerable time in Egyptian thought. Darkness was associated with uncertainty. When wild animals prowled, spirits wandered, and chaos threatened to intrude on order. Without the protection of gods, night could feel unsafe. Household rituals provided reassurance. As a family prayed to Bes or Taweret, they felt the invisible boundary of the home strengthened, a shield of divine power that kept danger outside. In wealthier houses, these rituals could be elaborate. Priests or servants might prepare offerings of meat, vegetables, or wine, arranging them before carefully carved shrines. Musicians might play flutes or sistrums, their music calling blessings into the home. Perfumes and incense filled the rooms, creating an atmosphere of sacred beauty. Yet in the humblest dwellings, with nothing more than a single clay figurine and a spoken prayer, the same sense of peace and protection could be found. The imagery of household gods also appeared beyond shrines. Amulets were common, worn by men, women, and children alike. A small pendant of Bes hung around the neck, served as a constant reminder of his guardianship. Taweret amulets were often given to expectant mothers, symbols of safe childbirth and motherhood. Even cosmetic items carried protective imagery. Mirrors, combs, and coal jars often bore the faces of these deities, ensuring their blessings extended into daily tasks. As the family settled for the night, the presence of household gods was felt all around. A mother placing her child into bed might touch the amulet of Bes or Taweret, whispering a blessing as she tucked in the linen cover. A father lighting the final lamp might glance at the shrine, murmuring a prayer for peace through the night. Children, comforted by stories of their protectors, drifted into sleep, believing that fierce little bees stood ready to chase away nightmares. Even dreams themselves were thought to be touched by the gods. Egyptians believed dreams could carry messages from the divine, offering guidance, warnings, or glimpses of the future. By purifying themselves and honoring their household gods before sleep, families hoped not only for rest, but for dreams filled with truth and blessing rather than fear. Imagine the scene now, a quiet mud brick home in the glow of lamplight. In one corner, a small shelf holds figurines of Bes and Taweret. A faint curl of incense smoke rises into the night air, carrying with it the scent of frankincense. A child yawns, clutching a small amulet as eyes grow heavy. Parents exchange a glance of reassurance, knowing that their gods stand watch. Outside, the desert winds whisper, but inside the home there is calm, safety, and peace. For the Egyptians, these rituals were more than superstition. They were a way of weaving the divine into the fabric of ordinary life. The great temples belonged to kings and priests, but the household gods belonged to everyone: farmer, fisherman, artisan, and noble alike. They transformed ordinary homes into sacred spaces, turning each night into an act of faith and trust. And so, as Egyptians once prayed to their household gods before closing their eyes, so may we too remember the comfort of ritual. Whether by lighting a candle, whispering a prayer, or simply pausing to breathe deeply, we create our own small shrines of peace. The gods may not be the same, but the desire is unchanged: to feel safe, to be protected, and to rest in the quiet assurance that the night will pass in peace. As night fell across Egypt and families settled into their homes, the great temples of the land also entered their own evening rhythm. These towering structures, built of stone and adorned with carved reliefs, stood as both centers of worship and symbols of divine presence. Unlike the quiet courtyards of homes, temples carried a different weight. Rituals performed that were not only for individual families, but for the entire kingdom, linking the human world with the eternal realm of the gods. Evening in the temples was a time of transition. Just as households lit lamps and whispered prayers to their protective deities, priests prepared to honor the great gods who governed the universe. The belief was simple yet profound: if the gods were cared for properly, order would be preserved. If neglected, chaos might intrude, threatening crops, families, and the very balance of life. And so, as dusk deepened, priests stepped forward to carry out rituals that safeguarded both people and cosmos. Temples in Egypt were vast complexes, often with multiple courtyards, halls, and sanctuaries. At sunset, activity within their walls did not cease. Instead, it shifted. During the day, the outer courtyards might be filled with worshippers bringing offerings, bread, beer, flowers, or incense. But as night approached, the public withdrew, leaving only priests within the sacred spaces. Silence fell, broken only by the soft shuffle of sandaled feet and the low crackle of oil lamps being lit along corridors. Inside the innermost sanctuaries, rituals for the gods unfolded with great care. Priests approached the cult statues-carved figures believed to house the essence of the gods themselves. These statues were not mere images. They were treated as living beings. Just as a person needed food, clothing, and protection, so too did the gods in their temple homes. At dusk, priests performed the closing of the shrine. They washed the statue, anointed it with oils, and dressed it in fresh linen. Jewelry was placed around its neck, crowns set upon its head, and sacred insignia arranged nearby. Incense was burned, filling the room with a sweet haze that symbolized prayers rising to the heavens. The god was then offered food platters of bread, fruits, vegetables, roasted meats, and vessels of beer and wine. Though the deity consumed none of it physically, the offerings were believed to nourish the god's spirit. Once the ritual was complete, the food might later be distributed to priests or even to the poor, a reminder that divine blessings flowed outward to the people. As night deepened, lamps and braziers were kept burning in the temples. Firelight flickered across painted walls and towering columns, illuminating images of gods, pharaohs, and cosmic battles carved in stone. The glow of the lamps symbolized the eternal flame of life, warding off the dangers of night. For Egyptians, darkness was not neutral. It represented the realm of chaos, the threats of wild animals, hostile spirits, and the primordial disorder that the sun god Ra fought each night in his journey through the underworld. Keeping the temple lit was not merely practical, it was essential, ensuring that light, order, and divine presence remained alive in the world. The priests themselves lived highly disciplined lives, especially those serving in the great temples of Thebes, Memphis, or Heliopolis. Purity was required before they could enter sacred space. They bathed several times a day, shaved their bodies to remove impurities, and dressed in spotless linen. Evening duties continued this rhythm. Before handling the statues or offerings, they washed again, chanting hymns as they prepared themselves. These actions were meditative, blending physical acts with spiritual intention. One of the most solemn evening rituals was the recitation of protective spells. Priests chanted hymns that described Ra's nightly journey through the underworld, his battles against the great serpent Apophis, embodiment of chaos. Their voices, low and rhythmic, filled the temple halls, echoing softly in the stone chambers. By speaking these words, they believed they lent power to Ra's fight, ensuring that dawn would come again. In this way, the rituals of the temple were inseparable from the cosmic cycle. Just as families prayed at home for protection, priests prayed in temples for the survival of the entire world. Temples at night were places of profound stillness. The massive pylons at their gates stood like guardians against the dark, while the air inside was heavy with the scent of incense and oil. The murmur of chanting mixed with the faint crackle of flame. Outside, the desert night whispered with wind and animal cries. But within the temple walls, there was an aura of safety, as though one had stepped into the very heart of order. Not all Egyptians entered these sacred spaces at night indeed. Most never did. But they trusted that the priests kept the gods satisfied and the balance preserved. From their homes, they might glimpse the glow of temple fires in the distance, or hear faint music drifting through the night air. These were reminders that the gods were awake, cared for, and watchful, even as humans slept. Festivals sometimes transformed evening temple rituals into grand celebrations. During certain holy days, processions carried statues of gods out of their sanctuaries, parading them through the streets by torchlight. Crowds gathered to sing, dance, and pray, their voices rising like waves beneath the starlit sky. These moments of joy connected the divine with the community, breaking the boundary between temple and home. But on most nights, the temples remained quiet, the rituals hidden, carried out in the hush of devotion. The pharaoh himself, seen as both king and divine intermediary, was believed to share in these duties symbolically. Though he did not attend every ritual, inscriptions often describe him as the one who feeds the gods and keeps the lamps burning. In this way, every offering made by priests was also credited to the pharaoh, reinforcing his role as guardian of Maat. The connection between ruler, gods, and people was thus renewed each evening, ensuring continuity through the dark. Imagine then, standing in a temple at night. The halls are cool, the stone beneath your feet firm and ancient. Shadows dance on painted walls, or gods stride in brilliant colors, their eyes seeming to watch as you pass. The air is thick with the perfume of myrrh and frankincense. In the sanctuary, priests bow before a statue glowing in lamplight, its eyes glinting like stars. A hymn rises slow, steady, soothing. It is not only for the god, but for the world, carrying the hope that dawn will come, as it always has. For the Egyptians, these temple rituals were essential acts of care. They believed the gods required constant attention, just as humans did. By tending the gods each evening, washing, feeding, lighting, and guarding, the priests ensured that the universe itself was sustained. Without these acts, night might overwhelm the world. With them, order remained, and people could rest in peace. And so, while families in their homes prayed to Bes, Taweret, and Isis, priests in temples honored Ra, Amun, Osiris, and Hathor. Together, these rituals formed a web of protection, stretching from the humblest hut to the grandest sanctuary. Night could be faced without fear, for gods and humans alike were awake, united in the eternal rhythm of day and night. For us today, imagining these temple evenings reminds us of the power of ritual. Whether simple or grand, performed in quiet homes or towering sanctuaries, these acts gave meaning to night and turned darkness into a time of trust. And just as the Egyptians once closed their eyes believing priests were chanting for dawn, so may we find comfort in knowing that night always yields to morning, and that even in silence there is care, order, and hope. As the lamps flickered and the hum of the village quieted into night, the women of ancient Egypt often carried on with tasks that balanced duty and care, necessity and rest. For many, the close of day was not a complete pause from responsibility, but rather a shift into gentler rhythms, moments of work that sustained the household, mingled with time for conversation, laughter, and personal relaxation. In Egypt's households, women were the keepers of domestic life. They oversaw the preparation of meals, the care of children, the management of supplies, and the small but vital details that kept families nourished and safe. Evening highlighted this role. After the main meal, there were dishes to wash, grain to grind for the next day's bread, and lamps to tend so that light would last through the night. These tasks, though quiet and repetitive, carried their own sense of ritual. Grinding grain was one of the most important and laborious tasks. Women bent over heavy stone querns, rolling and crushing barley or emmer wheat until it became coarse flour. This was usually done during the day, but often continued into the evening when the cooler air made the work more bearable. The steady rhythm of stone against stone was almost meditative, blending into the evening's natural soundtrack of frogs, crickets, and distant voices. The flour prepared at night meant fresh bread in the morning bread that sustained families through labor, prayer, and ritual alike. Weaving was another evening duty. Looms set up in courtyards or small workspaces became places of activity after sunset. Women wove linen from flax fibers, creating garments, bedding, and wrappings that were essential to daily life. The gentle pull of threads, the beat of the shuttle, and the growing fabric stretched across the loom were slow, rhythmic movements, soothing even as they demanded focus. Children sometimes helped by twisting flax fibers or winding thread, their small hands learning the skills passed down from mothers and grandmothers. Yet women's evenings were not only about work. These moments also provided space for companionship and social life. In the quiet of dusk, neighbors often gathered to share stories, exchange advice, or simply talk about the events of the day. Laughter spilled softly into courtyards as women sat together, weaving or grinding, while discussing marriages, births, or the rhythms of farming and trade. These conversations created bonds of friendship and community, turning duty into something shared rather than endured alone. Storytelling was central to these gatherings. Women told tales of gods and goddesses, heroic adventures, or clever tricks that amused children and adults alike. Some stories carried warnings, teaching lessons about respect, loyalty, or honesty. Others offered humor, poking fun at life's challenges in ways that brought relief after long days of labor. Children nestled close, eyes wide as they listened, their imaginations carried away by images of pharaohs, magical animals, and faraway lands. Self-care also had a place in women's evenings. After washing and purification, many women applied oils and cosmetics, both for beauty and comfort. Perfumed oils kept skin soft in Egypt's dry climate, while kohl lined eyes, reducing glare by day and enhancing beauty by night. These practices, sometimes dismissed as vanity in later times, were deeply valued in Egyptian culture, not only for appearance, but for health and protection. To anoint oneself with oil, to refresh with new linen, was a way of honoring both body and spirit. Music and dance, too, enlivened evenings. Women often sang while they worked, turning repetitive tasks into something lighter. Simple percussion instruments, hand clappers, sistrums, or tambourines added rhythm. In some households, dancing followed, with graceful steps performed for family or friends. These performances were not reserved for festivals alone, but appeared in ordinary evenings, filling homes with joy and movement. For wealthier women, evening brought different opportunities. With servants to manage chores, they could focus on leisure hosting guests, playing music, or reclining with wine and conversation. Noble women might spend time with cosmetics and perfumes, applying costly ointments imported from distant lands. They wore jewelry of gold and lapis lazuli, adorning themselves not only for beauty, but as a statement of status and divine favor. Their evenings were filled with poetry, games, or philosophical discussions. But like their humbler counterparts, they also sought relaxation and companionship. Motherhood, however, shaped the evenings of most women, regardless of wealth. Putting children to bed was a nightly ritual, filled with tenderness. Mothers sang lullabies, their voices soft and steady. They tucked amulets into bedding, kissed small foreheads, and whispered blessings for protection. Taweret and Bes were often invoked, their guardianship ensuring that children's dreams would be sweet and untroubled. The quiet moments between mother and child, bathed in lamplight, were among the most intimate and cherished of the evening. Evenings also provided space for reflection. Women prayed quietly at household shrines, asking the gods for health, fertility, and safety. They gave thanks for the day's harvest, for the food on the table, and for the family gathered under one roof. These prayers, though simple, carried profound meaning, reminding them that the cycle of life was upheld not only by labor, but by divine grace. The physical environment made evenings especially comforting. Cool breezes drifted through open courtyards, carrying the scent of lotus flowers from gardens, or the earthy aroma of fresh bread cooling on shelves. The glow of oil lamps softened walls and faces, casting shadows that danced gently as women worked or rested. The atmosphere was calm, protective, and intimate, a reminder that the home itself was a sacred space. Imagine now a scene, a group of women sitting together in a small courtyard, the loom's threads shimmering in lamplight. One woman weaves steadily, another grinds grain with rhythmic movements, while children chase each other before being hushed for bedtime. Nearby, an older woman tells a story, her voice rich and measured as listeners lean closer. The air smells of oil and baked bread, the night alive with quiet sounds. In this moment, duty and relaxation blend seamlessly, creating an evening that is both productive and deeply human. These nightly rhythms gave women not only a sense of purpose, but also moments of peace. They balanced endless responsibilities with laughter, beauty, and care for one another. And in doing so, they revealed the heart of Egyptian evenings, a life where work and rest, devotion and joy, practicality and spirituality were never separate, but always woven together, thread by thread. For us today, imagining their evenings offers both comfort and wisdom. The act of turning daily tasks into rituals, of finding companionship in shared duties, of balancing responsibility with small pleasures. All these remind us of timeless truths. That peace can be found in the ordinary. That relaxation does not always mean idleness, but can emerge from rhythm, music, and connection. And that, even thousands of years ago, women sought the same thing we do now, moments of calm, belonging, and joy before sleep. And so, as the women of ancient Egypt once ended their days in the glow of lamplight, may we too find rest in small rituals and quiet bonds, letting the night gather us into its gentle embrace. As twilight deepened and the stars emerged over the Nile, the lives of children in ancient Egypt shifted from play and curiosity into the quiet rhythms of night. For them, the day was often filled with laughter, games, chores, and learning. But the evening brought a gentler pace, when parents gathered them close, soothed their restless energy, and prepared them for rest. Nightfall, for Egyptian children, was both comforting and magical, a time when stories, lullabies, and protective rituals wove safety around their small, dreaming bodies. Children in Egypt lived active days. They chased each other through village lanes, played games with balls made of papyrus or clay, and practiced with toys shaped like animals or miniature boats. Some imitated adults at work, pretending to farm or fish, while others learned useful skills by helping with small chores. By dusk, their energy was still bright, their voices ringing in courtyards and along riverbanks. Yet as darkness crept across the land, parents gently gathered them in, guiding them from play into calm. The first step in this transition was often washing. Mothers or older siblings fetched water from jars, splashing coolness onto dusty faces and small hands. Sometimes children were bathed entirely, their skin rubbed with oils to protect against dryness. The act of cleansing was practical, but it also had symbolic weight. Washing away the dirt of the day meant entering the night fresh, pure, and safe. Children often giggled as water was poured over them, the splashes breaking the seriousness of the ritual. Next came food. Evening meals for children mirrored those of adults: bread, beer, often diluted for the young, vegetables, and fruits like dates or figs. Mothers encouraged children to eat well, knowing that full stomachs meant deeper sleep. Special treats, like honey or sweet cakes, might be given on festive evenings, adding to the sense of comfort and delight. As little hands grasped bread or nibbled at onions, the family circle wrapped them in belonging. After meals, the mood shifted toward winding down. Children often played quieter games: knucklebones, drawing lines in the dust, or listening to riddles posed by elders. Some practiced with musical instruments, blowing gently into small flutes or plucking tiny harps. Their laughter softened, blending into the general hum of the household as lamps flickered and shadows grew longer. Storytelling became central at this time. Parents and grandparents told myths of the gods: Horus avenging his father Osiris, Isis weaving spells of love and protection, or Re sailing through the underworld to bring back the dawn. Children listened wide-eyed, their imaginations alight with visions of falcon-headed gods, radiant goddesses, and serpents of chaos lurking in the dark. These stories were not only entertainment but lessons, teaching them about loyalty, courage, and the eternal order of the world. Ghost stories and folktales also played their part. A mischievous animal might trick a greedy neighbor, or a wandering spirit might visit a careless farmer. Children squealed with fear and delight, clinging to one another, but always reassured by the laughter of their parents. These tales gave shape to their fears, while teaching that cleverness and kindness often triumphed. When children grew drowsy, mothers or nurses sang lullabies. These songs, soft and rhythmic, were often accompanied by gentle rocking or the tapping of hands. The lyrics sometimes invoked protective gods, asking them to guard the child's sleep. Others simply described soothing images: the Nile flowing calmly, lotus flowers drifting on the water, or stars twinkling above the desert. The melody lulled the child's mind into peace, just as it does for us when we listen across the distance of centuries. Amulets played an important role in children's nights. Small charms shaped like scarabs, the eye of Horus, or figures of Bes or Taweret were hung around their necks or placed under pillows. These talismans were believed to ward off evil spirits, protect against illness, and bring sweet dreams. Some families placed magical spells written on papyrus near the child's bed, words of power meant to shield the soul during its nightly journey. Parents found comfort in these protections, knowing their children were watched over even in the vulnerable world of sleep. Sleeping arrangements varied. In humble homes, children often shared mats or low beds made of reeds or straw, covered with linen. They lay close together, brothers and sisters whispering softly before drifting into slumber. In wealthier households, children might have their own small wooden beds, with carved headrests and finer linens. Regardless of wealth, the presence of family created safety. The sound of a mother's voice, the warmth of a sibling nearby, or the flicker of a lamp at the shrine gave reassurance that the night was not threatening but peaceful. The night sky itself played a role in children's evenings. Stars glittered in the vast desert sky, and parents sometimes pointed them out, naming constellations and explaining their meanings. The goddess Nut, arching over the world as the sky itself, was said to cradle the stars as her children. Such stories helped children see the heavens not as distant or frightening, but as a canopy of protection. For a child lying in bed, the twinkle of stars was both a marvel and a comfort, a reminder that the gods watched over all. Dreams, too, were taken seriously. Egyptians believed dreams could be messages from the gods, and children were no exception. Parents sometimes asked their children what they dreamed upon waking, looking for signs or lessons. To encourage peaceful dreams, protective rituals were performed at night, and the presence of Bes and Taweret was invoked once more. Nightmares were explained as tricks of evil spirits, chased away by the gods' guardianship. Even illness or restlessness in children was addressed spiritually. A crying baby might be soothed not only by rocking and song, but by reciting protective incantations. Mothers whispered prayers to Isis, goddess of motherhood, or placed amulets of Hathor near the cradle. These acts blended practical care with spiritual assurance, making the night a sacred time of nurturing. Imagine now the tender scene of an Egyptian household at night. A mother sits with her child in her lap, humming softly as the little one's eyes grow heavy. The scent of oil lamps drifts in the air, mingled with the sweetness of lotus flowers outside the door. A small amulet rests beside the child, glinting faintly in the flickering light. Siblings curl together on a mat, whispering until silence overtakes them. Outside, the desert winds sigh, but inside, peace reigns. The household gods stand watch, the stars glitter above, and the children drift into dreams with smiles on their faces. For Egyptians, children at nightfall were not only individuals preparing for sleep, but symbols of the future. Their safety represented hope, continuity, and the preservation of family lines. To guard them was to guard the future itself. And so, each night became a ritual of protection and love, reaffirming the bonds between parent and child, between family and gods, between humanity and the eternal rhythm of the cosmos. And for us, listening now, there is comfort in knowing that these tender rituals are timeless. Parents across millennia have sung lullabies, offered blessings, and whispered reassurances to children before bed. Whether in a mud brick home on the Nile or in our own bedrooms today, the essence remains the same: love, protection, and the quiet promise that the night will pass gently into morning. As dusk descended upon Egypt, the Pharaoh, the living god, Lord of the two lands, and the axis upon which cosmic order rested, also moved into the slower rhythms of evening. Yet unlike farmers, artisans, or children, the twilight hours of a pharaoh were filled with both luxury and responsibility. For the king was more than a man. He was the embodiment of divine power on earth, a guardian of Ma'at, and even in the quiet of night, his presence was thought to sustain the balance of the world. Adorned with painted walls and colonnaded courts. Unlike the small mud brick houses of commoners, the royal residence glowed with activity long after sunset. Servants hurried through wide corridors, carrying trays of food, vessels of wine, or jars of perfumed oils. Musicians tuned their instruments, dancers prepared to perform, and scribes awaited instructions, ready to record decrees or keep the king informed of affairs, even at night. The palace was not simply a home. It was a living center of political, spiritual, and cultural life. The pharaoh's evening often began with a meal, far grander than that of any ordinary Egyptian. While farmers ate bread, beer, and fish, the king dined on roasted meats, seasoned vegetables, and fruits gathered from across the land. Ducks, geese, beef, and lamb appeared on golden platters, flavored with spices and herbs. Wine, imported from the Delta, or even from foreign lands, filled the king's cup. Musicians played softly as he ate, their harps and flutes weaving a serene background. For him, dining was both nourishment and ceremony, a reflection of abundance under his rule. Feasts sometimes extended into banquets, where nobles, priests, and foreign envoys reclined on couches, enjoying lavish hospitality. Torches flickered in ornate stands, casting golden light across walls painted with scenes of triumph and prosperity. Dancers moved gracefully, their anklets chiming softly, while servants poured wine and offered platters of figs, dates, and honey cakes. Yet even amid laughter and music, the presence of the pharaoh was awe-inspiring. Guests bowed low, addressing him as a god among men, their words filled with reverence. But Pharaoh's evenings were not always public. In more private hours, he withdrew to chambers where only his family and closest attendants were present. Here, twilight softened into something more intimate. The king might sit with his queen, sharing quiet conversation, or watch his children play at his feet. Servants applied fragrant oils to his skin, massaged his shoulders, or brought clean linen garments embroidered with gold thread. The atmosphere, though still filled with ceremony, was calmer, more reflective of personal life than political duty. Even in these private moments, the pharaoh remained a bridge between humanity and divinity. Rituals followed him into the night. Priests from the temple often entered the palace to perform evening blessings, offering prayers to the gods for the health and protection of the king. Incense burned in golden censers, filling the royal chambers with the scent of frankincense and myrrh. Hymns were sung, invoking Ra's safe passage through the underworld and asking for the pharaoh's strength to be renewed with the dawn. The symbolism of night was deeply felt in the life of the pharaoh. Just as Ra battled chaos in the underworld each evening, the king's role was to preserve order during times of vulnerability. Twilight was a reminder of this eternal cycle, the sun setting into darkness, only to rise again through divine strength. By performing his own nightly rituals, the pharaoh aligned himself with Ra, ensuring that his reign mirrored the cosmic journey of the sun. The royal bedchambers were richly adorned. Walls were painted with protective images figures of Bes and Taweret, stars of the goddess Nut, or the watchful eye of Horus. Fine linens covered the bed, soft and cool against the skin. Pillows were carved from wood or ivory, sometimes padded with linen, ensuring that the king's rest was supported. Perfumed oils were dabbed onto cushions, releasing fragrance through the night. Lamps burned low, casting soft glows over carved columns and gilded furniture. To lie in such a chamber was to feel surrounded not only by wealth, but by divine guardianship. Pharaohs often sought wisdom or guidance before sleep. Scribes read aloud from sacred texts or recited prayers meant to call upon the gods. Sometimes magicians, learned in protective spells, were summoned to ensure that no evil spirit or ill dream disturbed the king. Amulets were placed near his bed, charms inscribed with hieroglyphs of protection. In this way, even the most powerful man in Egypt acknowledged the vulnerability of night and the need for divine support. For royal children, evenings with their father carried a sense of awe. They listened as he spoke of his duties, or watched as priests performed rituals in his presence. Through these moments, they learned that kingship was not merely about wealth and privilege, but about responsibility to gods, to people, and to the eternal order of the cosmos. In the glow of lamplight, they absorbed lessons that would one day guide their own roles in the kingdom. Yet despite all the grandeur, Pharaoh's evenings were also deeply human. He too sought comfort at the end of the day. He too allowed music to soothe him, stories to lighten his mind, and oils to refresh his body. He too closed his eyes under the canopy of stars, trusting in the gods to bring the dawn. In this way, the king was not so different from the farmer or the fisherman. All Egyptians, no matter their station, shared in the same rhythm of day and night, work and rest, fear and hope. Imagine now the scene of Pharaoh's twilight. The palace glows with lamplight, columns towering above painted walls. Musicians play softly, their melodies winding through the halls. Priests chant blessings, smoke of incense rising like golden mist. In his chamber, the king reclines upon fine linen, his body cleansed and perfumed, his heart quieted by ritual. Outside, the desert night stretches vast and silent, stars glittering overhead. Inside, the pharaoh rests, his presence a living promise that order will hold through the dark. For Egyptians, this vision was not simply about a man It was about stability, continuity, and the assurance that life itself would continue with the rising of the sun. The pharaoh's twilight was a symbol of harmony, blending majesty and humanity, duty and rest. And for us, reflecting now, there is comfort in this timeless picture. Even the most powerful sought peace at the end of the day. Even kings closed their eyes with trust, surrendering to the mystery of night. And so may we, too, find solace in twilight, knowing that night is not an ending but a pause, and that morning always returns. As darkness spread across the Nile Valley, and the desert winds whispered through villages, the question of light became central to Egyptian evenings. Night brought rest and peace, but it also carried mystery and uncertainty. To push back the shadows, Egyptians turned to fire candles, lamps, and small hearths that glowed in the gloom, offering warmth, safety, and comfort. These flames were not only practical, they were sacred symbols of life, protection, and the eternal order of the cosmos. Unlike the world we know today, where light is summoned with the flick of a switch, the Egyptians lived by the rhythm of natural light. When the sun set, the land grew truly dark. The stars glittered overhead, the moon waxed and waned, but within homes and temples, fire was the only source of illumination. Its flicker shaped how people moved, worked, and even imagined the world after dusk. The most common form of light in Egyptian homes was the oil lamp. Made of clay, these simple vessels were shaped like shallow bowls, with a small spout at one end to hold a wick. Linen or papyrus fibers were twisted into wicks, then soaked in oil. Castor oil, sesame oil, and even animal fats served as fuel, though wealthier households preferred fragrant oils that released both light and soothing scents. When lit, the lamp gave a steady glow, its flame dancing gently against the walls. In wealthier homes and palaces, lamps could be more ornate, made of bronze, alabaster, or faience, with carved or painted decorations. They might be set on stands or hung from brackets, filling large rooms with a golden glow. Temples, too, kept lamps burning throughout the night, the flames seen as symbols of divine presence. To let a temple's light go out was unthinkable. Priests tended the lamps carefully, ensuring that the gods remained honored and the forces of chaos kept at bay. Candles, as we know them today, were not common in ancient Egypt, though some sources suggest reeds dipped in fat may have been used in similar fashion. More often, torches provided light in outdoor spaces. Bundles of reeds or sticks bound together and soaked in resin or fat could be ignited, carried by hand, or set in holders along pathways and courtyards. Their flames crackled, throwing long shadows against mud brick walls, guiding families safely through village lanes or palace gardens. Fires were also central to the evening. Hearths, whether simple pits in the ground or larger stone structures, provided both light and warmth. In winter, when desert nights grew cold, families gathered near fires, their bodies huddled close as the flames flickered. The crackle of wood, the glow on familiar faces, and the warmth that pushed back the chill created a sense of safety. For children, the fire was mesmerizing. Its dancing sparks a kind of nightly entertainment. Fire was more than practical, it was deeply symbolic. In Egyptian belief, fire represented life itself, a force of transformation and renewal. The sun, seen as a great fireball, was the ultimate source of energy, and the flames of lamps and hearths echoed that cosmic light. Lighting a lamp at night was not only a way to see. It was a small act of devotion, an affirmation that light and order endured even in darkness. The imagery of fire appears in Egyptian rituals and texts. Spells invoked flames as protection against evil, imagining fire as a barrier through which no spirit could pass. Lamps were placed in tombs to light the journey of the dead, ensuring they found their way through the underworld. Fire was a guide, a weapon against chaos, and a companion in life and death alike. Within homes, lamps shaped the atmosphere of evening. A glow of oil flames softened walls, cast gentle shadows, and turned ordinary spaces into places of calm. Families sat together in their flickering light, talking, weaving, or telling stories. The lamps burned quietly, their small smoke curls drifting upward, the smell of oil mingling with food and perfume. For Egyptians, these lamps were as much a part of home as the hearth or the bed, symbols of continuity and care. Imagine the scene: a modest mud brick house, its courtyard lit by a single clay lamp. A mother adjusts the wick with a careful hand, making sure the flame is steady. Children sit nearby, their eyes reflecting the golden glow. In the corner, a father mends a net, the light catching the threads. Outside, the world is dark and mysterious. But inside, the lamp creates a sanctuary. The flame hums softly, the night feels warm, and the family is safe. In wealthier houses, lamps multiplied, filling larger rooms with radiance. Brass holders reflected their glow, painted walls shimmered, and guests reclined in the soft light of many flames. Perfumed oils released sweet scents, blending with the music of harps and the clinking of wine cups. Fire turned the evening into elegance, just as it turned the simplest homes into havens of warmth. Even in temples, lamps transformed the night. Priests moved silently through dark halls, carrying small flames to illuminate statues of gods. The great sanctuaries, carved with sacred images, seemed to come alive in firelight, the gods' eyes gleaming, their carved forms moving with the dance of shadows. To witness such scenes was to feel the presence of the divine, as though light itself was a god's breath. The practical care of lamps was itself a ritual. Wicks needed trimming, oil needed replenishing. Women often oversaw these tasks, ensuring lamps lasted through the night. A flame that sputtered or went out too soon was troubling, a sign that attention had been neglected. And so, with careful hands, lamps were tended, their flames kept alive like guardians of the home. Fire also played a role in gatherings beyond the household. Night markets glowed with torches, traders displaying their goods beneath the crackling flames. Processions and festivals illuminated streets with blazing light, turning night into celebration. The sight of hundreds of torches reflected on the Nile during festivals must have been breathtaking. River of flame winding through the darkness, carrying joy and devotion across the land. For Egyptians, the relationship with light and fire was intimate and sacred. They lived with its limits, knowing that lamps burned only as long as oil was supplied, that fires consumed their fuel and then died. This dependence gave fire a sense of mystery, even fragility. It was life contained in flame, a reminder of how precious light was in a world surrounded by night. And so, when Egyptians prepared for bed, they often left a lamp burning near the household shrine, a flame to guard the family while they slept. Its glow reassured them that the gods were present, that darkness could not overwhelm. Just as Ra's great fire would return with dawn, the small flames of their homes carried them through the night. For us today, imagining those flickering lamps and glowing hearths offers comfort. The same flame that warmed and protected Egyptian families thousands of years ago still burns in our own rituals: candles on a table, fire in a hearth, or a soft light by a bedside. These lights remind us that night is not emptiness, but a space softened by warmth and hope. And so, as the Egyptians once drifted to sleep by the glow of oil lamps and crackling fires, we too can close our eyes, letting light linger within us, carrying us gently into dreams. When the last lamps flickered in homes and temples, when conversation grew quiet and children's eyes closed in sleep, the larger soundscape of Egypt revealed itself. Night in the desert was not silent, but alive with layers of sound and silence woven together into a symphony older than time itself. For the Egyptians, these nightly voices of the land were both familiar and mysterious, at once comforting and cautionary. They formed the background to every evening, shaping the way people drifted into dreams. The first thing one might notice was the silence of human activity. Daylight hours had been filled with hammering in workshops, shouts in the marketplace, the creak of wooden wheels, and the songs of laborers working the fields. But at night, the energy shifted. Villages settled into quiet, save for the occasional murmur of a voice or the bleat of an animal. The absence of daytime noise made other sounds sharper, more noticeable. It was in this contrast that the desert night revealed its character. From the Nile itself came gentle music. The river flowed endlessly, its waters carrying coolness into the night. The soft lapping of waves against boats and banks created a rhythm like breathing. Frogs croaked in chorus, their voices rising from canals and marshes, filling the dark with the steady pulse of life. Insects buzzed and clicked, creating a constant undertone. These small, persistent sounds were familiar companions, reminders that even in darkness, life thrived. The desert winds, too, had their voice. As the heat of the day dissipated, breezes stirred across the sands, whispering through reeds, rattling palm fronds, and sighing against stone walls. Sometimes the wind was gentle, carrying with it the faint scent of lotus flowers or river mud. At other times, it howled through narrow streets, moaning like a spirit. Egyptians often listened to these winds with respect, hearing in them the voices of gods or ancestors. The desert, after all, was never empty. It was filled with unseen presences. Animals added their part to the nightly chorus. Jackals cried in the distance, their high calls echoing across the fields. To Egyptians, the jackal was closely tied to Anubis, the god of the dead, and its voice was both eerie and sacred. Owls hooted from rooftops or trees, their wide eyes glinting in the starlight. Some believed the owl was an omen, a messenger from the other world, though its cry was also simply part of the night. Hyenas, with their strange laughter-like calls, haunted the edges of villages, searching for scraps. Donkeys brayed, dogs barked, and cattle shifted in their pens, each sound a reminder that the animals of the land shared the night with humans. For those who lay awake, these sounds could carry many meanings. A cry in the dark might stir unease, while the croak of frogs or the hum of insects soothed like a lullaby. Night was a time when imagination sharpened shadows seemed deeper, and every rustle in the reeds might be a spirit or a thief. Household gods and amulets were called upon, not only to protect against real dangers, but also to quiet the fears stirred by the desert night's mysterious music. The silence between sounds was just as powerful. Between the croaks of frogs, the sigh of wind, and the cry of jackals lay stretches of stillness, so deep it seemed the world was holding its breath. For Egyptians, silence was not emptiness, but a presence, a reminder of the vastness of the desert and the eternal night sky. It was in these pauses that they felt closest to the divine, sensing the universe beyond the reach of ordinary life. Above it all stretched the heavens. On cloudless nights, the stars blazed brightly, unhindered by artificial light. The Milky Way, known to Egyptians as a heavenly river, mirrored the Nile below. Constellations of gods, animals, and myths traced their stories across the sky. The moon, whether full and brilliant or a slender crescent, cast silver light across the sands. Its glow softened the darkness, illuminating temples, fields, and water. For Egyptians lying awake, the sky was alive, a vast stage where gods and souls journeyed through the night. Temples echoed differently at night. The chants of priests might carry faintly across the land, blending with the sound of rustling palms. The occasional ring of a sistrum or the low hum of a hymn punctuated the silence. These sacred sounds were reassuring, reminders that while families slept, the gods were still being honored, and the world was being safeguarded from chaos. Travelers and watchmen also added their voices. Guards patrolled city walls or temple grounds, calling out to one another to mark the hours. Caravans that preferred to move in cooler night air sometimes creaked along distant roads, their donkeys' bells tinkling softly. These sounds carried far in the stillness, drifting into villages like ghostly echoes of human life. For children, the desert night was magical. The cries of animals, the whisper of winds, and the glow of the moon turned the world into a place of wonder. Parents soothed their fears with stories, explaining that the jackal's cry was Anubis keeping watch, or that the stars were the goddess Nut's children shining above. In this way, sounds that might have been frightening became woven into the fabric of comfort, filled with divine meaning. Even for adults, the night held mystery. Dreams heard more clearly against the backdrop of silence carried messages from the gods. The rustle of reeds might be taken as a sign, the cry of a bird as an omen. For farmers, the chorus of frogs was a blessing promising fertile fields. For priests, the howling wind was a reminder of Ra's nightly battle against Apophis, the serpent of chaos. Each sound was interpreted, not dismissed, making the night a dialogue between the natural world and the human soul. Imagine now lying in a courtyard on a warm Egyptian night. The stars glitter above, and the moon casts its glow across the river. Frogs croak steadily, insects buzz, and a distant jackal calls. A breeze stirs the palm leaves, brushing your skin with coolness. Between these sounds stretches silence so deep it seems endless, filling you with calm. You close your eyes, feeling the rhythm of life continuing all around you. The night is alive, but it is also peaceful. You are safe within it, as were the Egyptians long ago. For them, the sounds and silences of the desert night were not background noise, but sacred companions. They reminded people of the gods, of life's cycles, and of their place in the great harmony of the cosmos. To listen to the night was to participate in eternity. And for us, too, there is comfort in this thought. The night still speaks, with wind, animals, and silence. To hear it is to slow down, to remember the vastness around us, and to feel part of something enduring. Just as Egyptians once lay beneath the stars, soothed by the music of the night, so may we let these sounds real or imagined carry us gently into sleep. While many Egyptians spent their evenings winding down in quiet homes, or listening to the sounds of the desert, there were other spaces alive with activity long after the sun had set. Nightfall did not always mean silence. In villages, towns, and cities along the Nile, the dim glow of torches and lamps revealed lively markets, bustling gatherings, and the hum of social life. For those who wished to extend the day, the evening hours offered a chance to trade, celebrate, and connect. Markets in Egypt were central to daily life. During the day, they were filled with merchants shouting their wares, the clatter of pottery, and the scent of fresh produce. But as the heat of the sun eased and shadows lengthened, some markets shifted into evening spaces. The cooler air allowed sellers to linger, and buyers often came after their work was done. The result was a twilight market less hurried than daytime, and alive with color, scent, and sound. Picture narrow lanes lined with stalls made of reed mats and wooden frames. Torches flared in holders, their light flickering across jars of beer, baskets of onions, bundles of flax, and heaps of dates. Vendors called softly, offering discounts to those willing to bargain at day's end. Fishermen displayed their catch, shimmering in the glow, while women sold bread still warm from clay ovens. The mingling aromas smoke, grain, fish, spices, and fruit created an intoxicating blend that marked the market's heartbeat. The night market was more than commerce. It was community. Neighbors gathered not only to buy, but to exchange news, laugh together, and tell stories. Travelers brought tales from distant towns, and traders from Nubia, Libya, or the Levant displayed exotic wares, incense, fine woods, beads of lapis lazuli. To walk through such a market was to glimpse both the familiar and the foreign, all under the glow of lamplight. Children darted through the crowds, clutching small treats or playing games between stalls. Musicians sometimes joined the scene, strumming harps or beating drums for coins, filling the market with rhythm. Dancers spun, their anklets jingling, drawing small audiences. The market became not only a place of trade, but a stage of culture, a living theater where the life of Egypt played out each night. Beyond the markets, Egyptians also gathered in homes, courtyards, and open spaces. Evening was a time for social visits, when friends and family came together to relax after work. In villages, this might mean neighbors sitting on mats, sharing bread and beer, while exchanging stories under the stars. In towns, wealthier households hosted gatherings with music, wine, and games of senet or mehen. These gatherings stretched long into the night, laughter and conversation weaving into the rhythm of the evening. Festive evenings held a special charm. Birthdays, marriages, or religious holidays transformed ordinary nights into celebrations. Streets filled with song, dancers twirled in torchlight, and banquets overflowed with food and drink. Guests reclined on low couches, attended by servants carrying platters of roasted goose, fruits, and cakes sweetened with honey. Cups of wine or beer passed from hand to hand, while harpers sang songs of love, joy, and the fleeting nature of life. These nights were more than indulgence. They were affirmations of community, reminders that life was best enjoyed together. Even small gatherings carried symbolic meaning. To share bread and drink under the stars was to reaffirm bonds of trust and kinship. Egyptians valued ma'at balance and harmony, and evening social life was one way of enacting that principle. A quarrel might be soothed over shared food, a friendship renewed through laughter, or a marriage arranged in the calm of night. The marketplace and the gathering alike became places where social order was woven and rewoven each day. The sensory experience of these evenings was vivid. Torches hissed as resin burned, sending up curls of smoke. The air was thick with the scent of grilled fish, roasted meats, and spiced stews. The soft murmur of conversation blended with the sharper notes of flutes and drums. Shadows of dancers stretched long against walls, while flickering flames painted faces in warm gold. For Egyptians, this was the living theater of night, both ordinary and magical. Night gatherings were not limited to the wealthy or the urban. Even farmers and herders, after long days of toil, found time for companionship. A circle formed around a fire, bread was passed, beer was poured, and songs rose into the cool desert air. Stories of ancestors, legends of gods, and tales of everyday humor kept spirits light. These small gatherings, humble though they were, carried the same essence as the grandest palace banquet: joy, connection, and the reaffirmation of life. Some evenings carried a more romantic air. Couples walked along the riverbanks, the moonlight reflecting off the Nile. Lovers exchanged songs or poems, words preserved in fragments of papyrus that speak of longing and affection. "My heart longs to walk with you," one ancient verse reads, capturing the tenderness of these quiet moments. For the Egyptians, love was not hidden. It was sung, celebrated, and woven into the fabric of evening life. The Nile itself often became a gathering place. Boats floated on its surface, some carrying families who wished to enjoy the breeze, others filled with music and laughter as friends sailed under the stars. Lanterns swayed gently from masts, their light reflecting on rippling water. For those on the banks, the sight of glowing boats moving silently across the river added beauty and wonder to the night. Imagine walking through one of these markets as the stars gleam above. Torches burn brightly, their flames flickering against baskets of figs and jars of oil. You hear the laughter of children, the bargaining of merchants, the strum of a harp. You smell roasted fish, fresh bread, and the sweet perfume of lotus flowers worn by women strolling through the crowd. Beyond the market, in courtyards and homes, people gather in small groups, their voices low, their faces glowing in lamplight. Together, they weave the life of Egypt into the fabric of night. For Egyptians, these evening gatherings were not distractions, but essential parts of life. They brought joy after toil, strengthened bonds of family and community, and reminded people that even in darkness, life flourished. The market stalls might close, the torches burn low, but the memories of laughter and companionship carried through the night, guiding hearts toward rest. And for us too, the image of these markets and gatherings offers comfort. It reminds us that human beings have always sought each other's company, that joy and connection have always filled our evenings, no matter the century. As Egyptians once lingered in torchlit markets and starlit courtyards, so may we remember to find warmth in simple gatherings, letting the hum of companionship carry us gently toward dreams. For the ancient Egyptians, sleep was far more than a biological necessity. It was a profound mystery, a nightly journey of the soul, and a subject worthy of observation, ritual, and even experimentation. Though they did not study sleep as modern science does today, they developed a rich and layered understanding of what it meant to rest, to dream, and to awaken. In their worldview, sleep was a bridge between the mortal world and the divine, a time when the soul itself could wander and return with messages from realms unseen. At the heart of Egyptian thought about sleep lay the concept of the Ba, the aspect of the soul that represented personality, individuality, and vitality. Unlike the physical body, the Ba could move freely. During the day, it animated the living being. At night, when the body was at rest, the Ba was believed to leave the sleeping form, traveling through dreamscapes and even the divine realms. This nightly journey was not dangerous in itself, but it required protection, for the wandering Ba could encounter spirits, gods, or forces of chaos. Ensuring a safe return was part of why protective rituals, amulets, and prayers surrounded the act of falling asleep. Dreams were the most visible sign of this journey. Egyptians saw dreams as communications from the gods, ancestors, or even one's own soul. Some dreams were gentle, filled with images of beauty, abundance, and joy. These were taken as blessings, signs of harmony and favor. Others carried warnings, visions of floods, serpents, or conflicts, which were interpreted as messages to be heeded. A dream could foretell illness, announce good fortune, or reveal the will of a god. To dismiss a dream was to risk ignoring divine guidance. So important were dreams that Egyptians developed practices to seek them intentionally. Dream incubation, as it is known today, involved sleeping in temples or sacred places in the hope of receiving a vision. A person might wash, purify themselves, offer prayers, and then sleep in the presence of a god statue, believing that the deity would send a dream with healing or instruction. Priests sometimes served as interpreters, helping to decode the symbols of these visions. This practice blurred the line between sleep and ritual, showing how deeply the Egyptians valued the messages hidden in the world of night. Beyond the spiritual, Egyptians also understood the practical aspects of sleep. They observed that people who worked hard in the fields slept deeply, that illness disturbed rest, and that certain foods or drinks could soothe or unsettle the body. They believed that a full belly aided sleep, but too much drink might cause restless dreams. Herbs and oils, such as mandrake or poppy, were sometimes used to induce drowsiness, while soothing scents like lotus or frankincense were thought to calm the mind. In these small ways, Egyptians practiced a kind of early science of sleep hygiene, blending observation with ritual. Medical texts, such as the Ebers Papyrus, reveal remedies for sleeplessness. Some involved drinking mixtures of herbs and honey. Others called for incantations alongside treatments, for the Egyptians rarely separated the physical from the spiritual. If the body failed to rest, it was not only a matter of illness, but possibly of spiritual imbalance, or the influence of malevolent forces. Healing required addressing both. Nightmares were of particular concern. A disturbing dream was not simply a passing vision, but a possible sign of danger. Protective measures were taken to guard against them. Amulets shaped like the eye of Horus or scarabs were placed near beds. Figures of Bes or Taweret, with their fierce visages, were thought to frighten away demons of the night. Spells were recited to banish ill dreams, invoking gods to shield the sleeper's soul on its nightly travels. Parents, especially, worried about children's dreams, surrounding them with charms to ensure their innocence was not troubled by dark visions. The connection between sleep and death was also significant. To the Egyptians, falling asleep was often described as a small rehearsal for dying, while waking was a kind of rebirth. Just as Ra traveled through the underworld each night to rise again, so too did humans enter darkness and emerge with the light of morning. Tombs sometimes bore inscriptions wishing the deceased a safe night's sleep, reinforcing the parallel between nightly rest and eternal rest. In this way, sleep was part of the great cycle of existence, another reminder of the order that bound all things together. Pharaohs and priests took sleep seriously, sometimes using it as a space for divine consultation. A ruler might receive guidance through a dream, interpreting it as the will of a god concerning war, politics, or temple construction. Priests trained in dream interpretation offered their services, decoding symbols with great care. For example, to dream of water might suggest renewal and fertility, while to dream of snakes could mean danger or transformation. These interpretations influenced decisions that shaped kingdoms, showing how deeply sleep was entwined with governance and faith. For ordinary Egyptians, sleep carried simpler but no less profound meanings. It was a time of rest after labor, of closeness to family, and of quiet safety under the gaze of gods. Yet even in the humblest homes, the mystery of dreams was honored. A farmer might wake and share his vision of a field flooded with strange water, pondering whether the Nile would rise unusually high. A mother might dream of her child surrounded by lotus blossoms and take it as a sign of blessing. These small interpretations wove dream into daily life, making the night as meaningful as the day. Imagine now an Egyptian lying down to sleep, their body washed and perfumed, their head resting on a wooden support. An amulet of Bes glints faintly in the lamplight, while the soft smell of oil fills the air. Outside, the frogs croak and the stars shimmer. As eyes close, the Ba stirs, preparing to wander. In dreams, the sleeper may walk through temples, hear the voices of gods, or see visions of tomorrow. At dawn, the soul returns, the eyes open, and life resumes, renewed and guided by what was glimpsed in the world of night. For us, reflecting on Egyptian ideas about sleep is comforting. Though we may explain dreams today with science and neurology, the sense that night is a time of mystery endures. The Egyptians remind us that rest is not merely physical but spiritual, that dreams can carry meaning, and that sleep itself is part of life's eternal rhythm. To close our eyes is to join an ancient tradition of trust that the soul will journey safely and return with the light of dawn. And so, just as Egyptians once surrendered themselves to the mysteries of night, we too can let go, allowing rest to come, dreams to unfold, and morning to rise again. For the ancient Egyptians, night was not simply a time for sleep, it was a passage through an unseen world. In the still hours, when the Ba, the soul's essence, wandered, protection was essential. Just as the living built walls to guard their homes and doors, to shield their belongings, they surrounded themselves with spiritual safeguards to protect the soul during its nightly journey. Amulets, charms, and magical spells were their defenses against the unknown, guardians of peace and dream. Egyptians believed that the night was full of presences both kind and hostile. The desert, so vast and empty by day, became mysterious after dark. The cries of jackals, the hoot of owls, and the whistle of winds could all be heard as voices of the spirit world. Shadows deepened, and with them came the possibility of chaos. The serpent Apophis seeking to swallow Rhea's sun barge, wandering spirits jealous of the living, or demons eager to disturb dreams. In such a world, protection was not a luxury, but a necessity. Amulets were the most common form of nightly defense. These small objects, made of stone, faience, gold, or simple clay, carried symbols of power. Each shape, each material, each inscription was carefully chosen for its meaning. Families placed them near beds, hung them around children's necks, or tied them into bedding. To sleep with an amulet was to sleep within a circle of divine guardianship. One of the most powerful symbols was the Eye of Horus, also known as the wedget. Representing health, protection, and restoration, the eye was believed to ward off evil and ensure wholeness. Worn on a pendant or carved into a bead, it kept the sleeper safe from harm. Just as Horus's eye had been restored after battle with Set, the eye glimmered in lamplight, a watchful presence through the night. The scarab beetle was another cherished protector. Scarabs symbolized rebirth, transformation, and the rising sun. To keep a scarab amulet by one's bed was to trust that, just as the beetle rolled its ball of life each morning, so too would the soul be safely renewed after its journey through the dark. Scarabs were carved into green stone, glazed faience, or inscribed with prayers, their rounded forms carrying the promise of dawn. Bes, the dwarf god with a fierce face and shaggy beard, appeared on countless amulets and household objects. His form was comical, even grotesque, yet that was his strength. His appearance frightened away evil spirits. Parents placed figures of Bes near their children's beds, trusting that his wild eyes and protruding tongue would drive nightmares away. Even cosmetics jars and mirrors bore his image, making beauty and protection part of daily life. At night, when children clutched a Bes amulet, they knew they were guarded by a divine friend who both laughed and fought for them. Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess of motherhood and fertility, was another beloved guardian. Her form part hippo, part lion, part crocodile was formidable, yet she was a protector, especially of mothers and children. Amulets of Taweret were placed beside infants, ensuring their dreams were undisturbed. Women, too, wore her charms, invoking her strength to keep harm away from their families. In the hush of night, the thought of Taweret standing watch, her massive body blocking the path of danger, brought comfort. Amulets could also take the form of hieroglyphic signs. The Ankh, symbol of life, was kept close to ensure vitality and longevity. The Jed pillar, symbolizing stability, brought strength to the sleeper's spirit. The Shen ring, a circle with a line at the bottom, represented eternity, enclosing the sleeper in endless protection. Each symbol carried centuries of meaning, compacted into the small form of a charm that fit easily into the hand. Beyond physical amulets, magical spells and charms added further layers of safety. Words, written or spoken, were believed to have power. A short prayer written on papyrus could be tucked beneath a pillow, the inked signs themselves forming a barrier against evil. Priests composed collections of dream spells, advising how to guard against nightmares or encourage prophetic visions. Some spells invoked gods directly, calling upon Isis, Thoth, or Ia to shield the sleeper. Others threatened spirits with punishment if they dared to intrude upon the dreamer's rest. Incantations were often spoken aloud as part of evening rituals. A mother might murmur protective words over her child, her voice soft and rhythmic, blending with the sounds of crickets and frogs outside. A father might stand at the doorway, reciting a prayer to keep the family safe as the night unfolded. These words, carried on the air, joined the glow of lamps and the scent of incense in creating a circle of security. Incense itself was protective. Burning frankincense or myrrh released smoke that Egyptians believed purified the air, driving away malevolent forces. The gentle fragrance calmed the mind, making sleep easier, while the curling smoke formed a visible veil against unseen dangers. Lamps were sometimes left burning near shrines, their steady light reinforcing the idea that the gods themselves watched through the night. Even dreams themselves were managed with charms. If a person suffered repeated nightmares, priests might prepare an amulet specifically designed to block them, inscribed with words of banishment. Special headrests, carved with protective symbols, were also used to guide the sleeper's dreams toward peace. These supports lifted the head above the bedding, keeping the air cool and the mind aligned with divine order. On their surfaces, the images of protective deities reminded the sleeper that they were never alone. For Egyptians, these practices were not superstition, but common sense. Just as one locked a door or tied up animals for the night, so too did one guard the soul with amulets and spells. The unseen world was as real as the visible one, and protection was as practical as food or shelter. To neglect it was to leave oneself vulnerable to forces beyond control. Imagine now an Egyptian family preparing for bed. A mother places a small scarab near her child's head, whispering a blessing. A father adjusts a lamp at the shrine, the light casting shadows of Bes across the wall. The scent of incense drifts through the room, mingling with the cool night breeze. Children clutch amulets of Taweret, their eyes heavy, their breathing slowing. The family settles into sleep, surrounded not only by walls, but by an invisible circle of divine protection. For them, this was not merely ritual, it was peace. With amulets and charms in place, they believed the soul's journey would be safe, dreams would be kind, and dawn would come as it always had. For us today, the idea carries comfort as well. Though we may not place scarabs or eyes of Horus by our beds, we too create rituals of protection, locking doors, leaving a light on, or keeping a cherished object nearby. These acts remind us of continuity across time, the human desire to feel safe as we surrender to the vulnerability of sleep. And so, just as Egyptians once drifted into dreams guarded by amulets, we too can let go, trusting in the symbols and rituals that bring us peace. With protection around us, we may close our eyes, confident that night will pass gently and morning will return. When the lamps glowed low and amulets were placed by shrines, Egyptians turned at last to their sleeping places. The act of lying down, of surrendering the body to rest, was shaped not only by ritual, but by the very materials and arrangements of the bed itself. Though modest or grand, depending on wealth, the spaces Egyptians created for sleep reveal much about their daily lives, their sense of comfort, and their relationship with night. For many ordinary families, sleep took place on simple reed mats spread across the floor of a mud brick home. These mats, woven tightly from papyrus stalks or palm fibers, provided a barrier against the cool ground. On top, linen cloths softened the surface, offering comfort to tired bodies. Families often shared these spaces, parents and children lying close together. The warmth of companionship, combined with the simplicity of the bedding, created both physical and emotional comfort. To sleep in such closeness was to feel protected, to breathe in rhythm with loved ones. Wealthier Egyptians, however, enjoyed raised wooden beds. These were crafted with skill, their frames carved from acacia, tamarisk, or imported cedar. Some were simple, 4 sturdy legs supporting a slatted surface. Others were elaborate, with legs shaped like lion's paws, carved with hieroglyphs, or inlaid with ivory and precious stones. The raised height kept sleepers away from insects and drafts, while also symbolizing status and refinement. To recline on such a bed was to rest not only in comfort, but in dignity. On these beds, instead of the soft pillows we know today, Egyptians used headrests. These were small supports, typically carved from wood, stone, or even ivory, consisting of a curved top set upon a base. The headrest lifted the sleeper's head slightly above the bed, keeping it cool in Egypt's hot climate and protecting elaborate hairstyles or wigs. For the wealthy, headrests were intricately decorated with protective symbols, eyes of Horus, images of gods, or scarab beetles carved into the sides. For commoners, a simple wooden curve sufficed, sturdy and functional. To modern minds, the headrest may seem uncomfortable, yet Egyptians valued its practicality. The cooling effect of air flowing around the head helped during warm nights, and the spiritual symbolism mattered even more. The head was considered the seat of the soul, and to rest it on a carved support, decorated with protective images, was to guard the most sacred part of oneself during sleep. Headrests were so important that they were placed in tombs, ensuring the deceased could rest comfortably for eternity. Bedding itself varied with status. Poor families had plain linen sheets, often coarse but breathable, ideal for the desert climate. Wealthier households used finer linens, whitened by careful washing or dyed in subtle colors. Some beds were draped with canopies of cloth, creating a sense of privacy and luxury. Others had woven nets stretched across the frame, supporting the body like a hammock and allowing airflow on hot nights. Sleeping arrangements were also practical. In small homes, space was shared by many. Children might sleep together on one mat, while parents occupied another nearby. In larger houses, separate rooms allowed for privacy, though families still often kept close. Servants sometimes slept near their master's quarters, ready to attend to needs during the night. In rural areas, animals were often kept in courtyards or adjacent spaces, their sounds and warmth blending into the nightly environment. Even the act of lying down had symbolic weight. Egyptians often depicted themselves reclining on beds with curved legs and animal motifs, suggesting that rest was more than a necessity. It was a continuation of harmony and order. Beds were not merely furniture, but symbols of stability, renewal, and life cycles. The placement of beds within the home was significant. Many were arranged near shrines, allowing the gods to watch over the sleeper. Lamps or small fires might be kept nearby, their glow flickering across walls. Doors were secured, shutters closed, but the bed became the true sanctuary. Within its boundaries, supported by wood, linen, and protective charms, the body surrendered to rest while the soul prepared to wander. Children, especially, were surrounded with extra care in their sleeping spaces. Amulets of Taweret or Bes were tied to their beds, dolls carved with protective symbols placed nearby. Mothers tucked linen covers around them, whispering blessings as they drifted off. The shared closeness of family beds meant that children felt safe, their dreams guarded not only by gods, but by the steady breathing of parents and siblings. In the palaces of kings and queens, sleeping arrangements were far more elaborate. The pharaoh's bedchamber was adorned with fine furniture, painted walls, and carved columns. The bed itself might be gilded, with legs shaped like lions or bulls, symbols of strength and protection. Cushions filled with feathers softened the surface, while embroidered linens covered the frame. Incense burned gently in golden holders, filling the room with calming fragrance. Here, the act of lying down to rest was almost ceremonial, blending luxury with the same spiritual protections that common families used in simpler form. Even in death, beds and headrests accompanied Egyptians. Tombs contained carved beds, sometimes complete with linen sheets, ensuring that the deceased could rest in the afterlife. Headrests inscribed with spells promised eternal protection for the soul. These objects show how deeply Egyptians connected sleep with eternity. The nightly act of lying down mirrored the greater journey of death, and waking each morning was seen as a small rebirth. Imagine now an Egyptian family preparing their beds for the night. A mother smooths linen over a reed mat, her children yawning nearby. A father adjusts a small lamp, its flame steady and warm. A simple wooden headrest waits, its curve familiar, its carvings reassuring. In a wealthier home, servants draw linen across a wooden frame, setting perfumed oils nearby, while in a palace, golden furniture gleams softly in the lamplight. Yet whether humble or grand, the essence is the same, a place of rest, a sanctuary against the night. For the Egyptians, beds and pillows were not luxuries, but necessities, imbued with meaning. They reflected the balance of body and soul, the care of family, and the eternal rhythm of rest and renewal. To lie down was to trust in the gods, to surrender the day, and to prepare for dawn. And for us, too, there is comfort in this picture. Whether on a simple mat or a soft modern mattress, we share the same desire for safety, for peace, for the reassurance of familiar spaces as we drift into dreams. The Egyptians remind us that a bed is more than furniture. It is a vessel for renewal, a place where the body rests, the mind wanders, and the soul is carried gently through the night. When the lamps burned low and the courtyards grew still, Egyptians often turned their eyes upward. For them, the night sky was not a distant scattering of stars, but a living tapestry filled with gods, spirits, and eternal stories. To lie beneath the heavens was to enter into a dialogue with the divine, to see in the stars the reflection of the Nile, and to sense the rhythm of eternity. Nighttime under the stars was both ordinary and sacred, an experience shared by every farmer, artisan, priest, and pharaoh. The Egyptian sky was vast and brilliant. With no modern lights to dull it, the stars shone with startling clarity. A Milky Way stretched like a glowing river across the darkness, and to Egyptians, it was exactly that, a celestial Nile flowing through the heavens. Just as the earthly Nile nourished crops and sustained life, this heavenly river carried the souls of the dead, ferried by divine boats into eternity. To gaze upon it was to be reminded of both the fragility and the continuity of life. The goddess Nut was believed to embody the night sky itself. She was imagined as a great woman arching over the earth, her body covered in stars. Each evening, she swallowed the sun as it set, carrying it through her body during the night. Each dawn, she gave birth to it again, renewing the world. When Egyptians looked upward, they did not see random lights, but the body of a goddess holding them within her vast embrace. In her arching form was comfort, the assurance that the sky itself was protective, eternal, and maternal. The constellations were also filled with meaning. The stars near Orion were associated with Osiris, Lord of the afterlife. His shining figure in the sky reminded Egyptians that the cycle of death and rebirth was woven into the universe itself. The bright star Sirius, called Sopdet, was linked to the goddess of the same name. Its rising each year signaled the flooding of the Nile, bringing fertility and abundance to the land. To see Sirius twinkle in the night sky was to glimpse both the goddess's light and the promise of harvest. Pharaohs and priests watched the stars closely. Astronomy in Egypt was not only scientific, but deeply spiritual. Priests tracked the movements of constellations to mark time, determine festivals, and align temples. Some temples were designed so that certain stars or the sun itself would shine directly into sacred chambers at specific times of year. At night, priests climbed onto temple roofs to observe the heavens, their eyes scanning for signs of divine order in the glittering sky. But ordinary Egyptians, too, felt the presence of the stars. Farmers reclining after long days of work, children lying beside their parents in courtyards, travelers sailing along the Nile gazed upward. For them, the stars were both familiar companions and mysteries. Some pointed out constellations to their children, telling stories of gods and heroes woven into the sky. Others made silent prayers, asking Nut, Osiris, or Sopdet to watch over them. The stars became guardians of the night, their eternal light a reassurance that the world was stable and cared for. The moon, too, played a vital role in Egyptian nights. Its phases guided calendars, marking festivals and agricultural cycles. When full, the moon bathed the land in silver light, softening the darkness and making travel or gatherings easier. When new, its absence deepened the mystery of the night. The moon was associated with Thoth, god of wisdom, writing, and time. His presence in the night sky was a reminder of knowledge, order, and divine care. To walk under the moonlight was to walk in his blessing. Dreams were thought to be influenced by the stars. Egyptians believed that the heavens communicated with human souls through visions in sleep. A bright star might appear in a dream as a symbol of divine favor. A falling star might suggest change or warning. Priests trained in dream interpretation often looked to both celestial events and nightly visions to guide their understanding of fate. The connection between sky and dream was seamless. Both were realms of mystery where God spoke to humanity. Festivals often extended into starlit nights. Torches and lanterns lit the streets, but above them, the stars seemed to join in the celebration. Hymns to Hathor, goddess of joy, or to Nut, mother of the sky, rose into the air, blending with music. For Egyptians, these moments connected earth and heaven, as though the stars themselves were listening and responding. The idea that the gods dwelled among the constellations gave every festival a cosmic audience. Imagine lying in a courtyard, the heat of the day gone, the breeze from the Nile cool on your skin. Above you, the stars blaze, bright and countless. You see Orion, the figure of Osiris, eternal in the sky. You see Sirius rising, herald of abundance. The Milky Way stretches like a silver river, Nut's body arching protectively overhead. Around you, frogs croak, insects hum, and the faint cry of a jackal echoes across the fields. But above, the heavens are silent and brilliant, reassuring you that order reigns in the universe. For children, these nights were magical. Parents pointed to constellations, telling them stories of God's adventures. There is Osiris, the judge of the dead. There is Sopdet, who brings the Nile's flood. The sky became a living book, written not in papyrus, but in light. Each star was a word, each constellation a sentence, teaching children that they were part of a world much larger than themselves. Even in death, the stars guided Egyptians. Tomb ceilings were painted with constellations, Nut's star-covered body stretching above the deceased. The soul, they believed, would join the stars, shining eternally in the heavens. To sleep beneath the stars was, in some ways, to practice eternity, to align oneself with the same cosmic rhythms that governed life and afterlife. For us today, the Egyptian night sky offers a gentle lesson. In their eyes, stars were not distant or cold, but intimate, protective, and divine. To look up was to feel part of a greater harmony, to know that life was held in balance by forces beyond human control. And in that recognition was peace. And so, just as Egyptians once closed their eyes under the vast canopy of Nut, trusting in the eternal order of stars, so may we too rest. The heavens remind us that night is not emptiness, but presence, not silence, but song. To lie beneath the stars is to feel eternity watching over us, and to drift into sleep is to join that timeless rhythm. Most nights in ancient Egypt followed familiar rhythms. Families gathered in courtyards, lamps flickered in shrines, and the sounds of frogs, wind, and quiet conversation filled the air. Yet there were evenings when this ordinary calm transformed into something spectacular. Festivals and celebrations brought communities together, filling the night with music, laughter, feasting, and ritual. These special evenings were bright interruptions in the flow of daily life, moments when Egyptians honored their gods, celebrated their families, and rejoiced in the abundance of life. Festivals were woven deeply into the Egyptian calendar. Guided by the cycles of the Nile and the stars, priests marked sacred days for gods, agricultural milestones, and seasonal transitions. These festivals often lasted several days, but evenings held a special place within them. By day, processions filled the streets, offerings were made, and temples resounded with hymns. By night, torches and lamps transformed the land into a glowing stage where gods and people seemed to meet. One of the grandest festivals was the Opet Festival in Thebes. Celebrated each year, it honored Amun, Mut, and Khonsu, the great gods of Karnak and Luxor. By torchlight, priests carried the sacred statues of the gods in golden boats, parading them through the city to the Luxor temple. Crowds gathered along the processional way, singing, clapping, and dancing as the glowing procession passed. The night air shimmered with incense. Music echoed through the streets. and ordinary citizens felt themselves drawn into the presence of the divine. Another important festival was the beautiful Festival of the Valley, also in Thebes. This celebration honored the dead, inviting families to gather at tombs and offer food, drink, and flowers to their ancestors. By night, families carried torches into the necropolis, feasting and telling stories among the tombs. Far from being somber, the festival was joyful and affirmation that the living and the dead were united. Under the stars, voices rose in laughter and song, as if the ancestors themselves had joined the gathering. Smaller village festivals had their own charm. At harvest time, when the fields yielded grain and fruit, communities celebrated with food and dance. Fires blazed in courtyards. Musicians played harps and drums, and neighbors gathered to share bread and beer. Children sang songs, couples danced, and elders told stories of past harvests. These evenings carried gratitude, joy, and relief, marking the successful end of hard labor with laughter and abundance. Weddings also transformed evenings into celebrations. The joining of two families was marked not only by ritual, but by feasting and merriment. Torches illuminated courtyards where guests gathered to eat roasted meats, fruits, and honey cakes. Musicians played lively songs, dancers entertained, and guests toasted the bride and groom with cups of wine or beer. The festivities lasted deep into the night, joy overflowing into music and storytelling. For Egyptians, marriage was both personal and sacred, and the evening of union shimmered with blessing. Special evenings were also devoted to music. Egyptians loved song, and gatherings often turned into impromptu concerts. Harpers sang verses of love, joy, or philosophy, reminding listeners of life's fleeting sweetness. One famous theme, preserved on papyrus, urged people to eat, drink, and be merry, for no one knew what tomorrow might bring. Under the stars, with cups of wine and laughter in the air, such songs carried a truth that touched all rich or poor, priest or farmer. Food and drink were central to these evenings. Platters of bread, bowls of stew, roasted ducks, figs, grapes, and dates filled the tables. Beer foamed in jars, and wine was poured freely in wealthier homes. Honey cakes, spiced with cinnamon or flavored with nuts, offered sweetness at the end of the feast. The scent of roasting meats and fresh bread filled the air, mingling with perfume and incense. Eating together was not only pleasure, but an act of community, an affirmation that life was shared and joy multiplied when enjoyed together. The senses were overwhelmed in such evenings. Torches flickered, casting golden light on painted walls and linen garments. Music thronged flutes, harps, tambourines, and sistrums ringing in rhythm. Dancers swayed gracefully, their movements echoing the cycles of life and nature. Perfumes of lotus oil and frankincense drifted through the night, mingling with the earthy aroma of fields and river breezes. For Egyptians, a festival night was a tapestry of sound, scent, sight, and taste, a celebration that engaged the whole being. Even the gods were thought to join these celebrations. Processions carrying their statues by torchlight symbolized their presence among the people. Hymns praised them, dancers honored them, and feasts offered them abundance. To celebrate at night was not only to enjoy life, but to honor the divine. Egyptians believed that by rejoicing, they aligned themselves with the gods, affirming the principle of Ma'at, the harmony of the universe. Not every night was filled with grandeur. Many special evenings were small and intimate family gatherings for a child's birthday, or neighbors celebrating a good harvest together. In these quieter celebrations, the essence was the same: laughter, companionship, and gratitude for life's gifts. Whether under golden torches in a great city or a single lamp in a humble courtyard, joy was joy, and celebration was sacred. Imagine now such an evening. You stand in a torchlit street, the statue of Amun passing by in a golden moat, the crowd singing in unison. Or you sit in a courtyard, surrounded by neighbors, the smell of roasted fish in the air, laughter rising into the night. Children dance, women clap in rhythm, men raise cups and toast. The stars blaze above, the river flows nearby, and the night feels timeless. For a moment, the ordinary and the divine merge, and life itself becomes a festival. For Egyptians, these special evenings reminded them that existence was not only toil and duty, but also joy and celebration. They reaffirmed bonds between families, between communities, and between people and gods. They made night not a time of fear or silence, but of light, sound, and abundance. And for us, imagining these festivals offers peace. We are reminded that even in ancient times, people sought moments of joy, gathering under the stars to eat, sing, and laugh together. The same rhythms echo in our lives today, whenever we share food, raise a glass, or dance in celebration. Joy is timeless, a thread that binds us to the Egyptians of long ago. And so, just as they once let music, firelight, and companionship carry them deep into the night, so may we let their memory soothe us now. For in the heart of every festival is a promise that life, though fleeting, is full of wonder, and that even the darkest night can be lit with joy. And so, our journey through the evenings of ancient Egypt comes to its end. We have walked with farmers returning from the fields at dusk, shared meals by the hearth, listened to music and stories in the glow of lamps, and stood in awe as priests tended the gods in their temples. We have seen mothers soothing children to sleep, pharaohs reclining in gilded chambers, and entire communities celebrating under torchlit skies. Each scene has revealed a truth that is as old as humanity itself. That night is not merely darkness, but a time of care, reflection, and renewal. For the Egyptians, the evening was sacred. It was a pause between the labor of the day and the promise of dawn, a moment to cleanse the body, honor the gods, protect the soul, and embrace family and community. Whether lying on simple reed mats or golden beds, whether surrounded by silence or the laughter of festivals, the people of the Nile trusted that the night would carry them safely into morning. Their rituals, their amulets, their prayers, and their songs all whispered the same assurance. You are safe, you are watched over, you are at peace. Imagine, as they once did, resting beside the Nile at night. The river flows softly, stars gleam above, and the cool breeze drifts across your skin. The sounds of frogs and insects hum in rhythm, while faint lamps glow in distant courtyards. Around you lies the vast desert, silent and eternal, while above, the goddess Nut stretches across the heavens, her body jeweled with stars. In this moment, you are held in the same embrace that once cradled the ancient Egyptians, the embrace of night, gentle, protective, and timeless. As you let these images settle in your mind, may they guide you toward rest. May the laughter of ancient festivals, the steady croak of frogs, and the glow of lamps calm your thoughts. May you feel, as the Egyptians once did, that the night is a sanctuary, a time not of fear but of trust. And as you drift into sleep, may you carry with you the peace of the Nile, flowing endlessly toward dawn. Thank you for spending this evening with us, exploring the gentle mysteries of the past. If you enjoyed this journey, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more calming histories, and share in the comments what eras, people, or rituals you would like to hear about next. And let us know when you listen, whether at bedtime, during rest, or in quiet moments of reflection. Your thoughts and presence help shape the stories we bring to you. For now, may your night be peaceful, your dreams gentle, and your morning bright. Until next time, rest well and sleep deeply, as though you too were resting beside the Nile.